Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I never imagined silence could be so heavy. But on my first night shift at the West Executive Building, I learned it was possible. Silence can press down on your chest like a physical thing, making every breath conscious. My name is Carter. I've been working as an agent for the United States Secret Service for 3 years. Before this assignment, I spent most of my days on protective detail, standing guard at events, conducting ID checks, simple tasks for someone at my level. The night shift was different. They told me it would be quiet, even simple and routine. They said most nights nothing would happen. The West Executive Building sits between the White House and the Eisenhower Executive Office Building. It's not a place most people know about, and that's by design. During the day, it's busy with staff moving between meetings, but after 10 p.m., the building empties out completely. By midnight, it's supposed to be a ghost town. My shift started at 2200 hours on a Tuesday in October. The weather outside was cold, that sharp kind of cold that comes early in the fall and catches you off guard. I reported to the security office on the ground floor where Agent Miller, the day shift supervisor, briefed me on the night protocols. Miller was in his mid-50s, gray at the temples, with the kind of face that had seen enough to not be impressed by much. He walked me through the basics. Monitor the access points, do hourly sweeps of each floor, check the camera feeds, log everything. Simple enough. Hardly anyone comes through here after 11, Miller said, tapping his pen on the desk. Maybe a staffer working late, but they'll badge in and out. You'll see it on the system. If anyone tries to enter without proper credentials, you call it in immediately. Don't engage alone. I nodded, taking notes, even though I'd already memorized the manual. Miller leaned back in his chair and looked at me for a moment. You ever worked nights before? Not like this, I said. Mostly events, daytime posts. He nodded slowly. Nights are different. Your mind plays tricks on you when it's this quiet. You'll hear things, see things in your peripheral vision. It's normal. Just stay alert and don't let your imagination run wild. I remember thinking that was an odd thing to say. Miller didn't strike me as the type to believe in ghost stories or paranoia, but he said it with the kind of tone that made me think he was speaking from experience. After the briefing, Miller showed me the monitor room. It was a small office with 6 screens showing different camera angles throughout the building. Lobby entrance, main corridor on the first floor, stairwell access points, second floor hallway, third floor hallway, and the rear service entrance. The feeds were clear, night vision filters giving everything a greenish tint. Most important thing, Miller said, pointing at the second floor camera, is this hallway. Second floor, east wing. It's the longest corridor in the building. Runs about 150 feet end to end. No offices down there anymore, just storage rooms and some archive space. It's been slated for renovation for about 2 years now, but the budget keeps getting pushed. Point is, nobody should be down there at night. If you see anyone on that feed, you call it in. Understood? Understood, I said, looking at the empty hallway on the screen. The lighting was dim, every third fluorescent panel turned off to save energy. It gave the corridor an uneven look, pockets of light and shadow alternating down its length. Miller checked his watch. All right, I'm heading out. You've got my number if anything comes up. Otherwise, just stick to the routine. You'll be fine. He left, and I heard his footsteps echo down the hallway until the sound of the exterior door closing cut them off. Then it was just me and the hum of the building's ventilation system. I settled into the monitor room chair and looked at the screens. Everything was still. I pulled out my phone and set a timer for my first patrol at 2300 hours. Until then, I figured I'd familiarize myself with the camera angles and get a feel for the building's baseline. The first hour passed without incident. I watched the feeds, saw nothing move except the occasional flutter of a paper caught in an air vent current. At 2300, I stood up, grabbed my flashlight, and started my first sweep. The building felt bigger at night. During the day, I imagined it was just another office space. People walking around with coffee, phones ringing, the normal hum of bureaucracy. But at night, with all the lights dimmed and the hallways empty, it felt almost cavernous. My footsteps echoed no matter how quietly I tried to walk. I started on the ground floor, checking each door to make sure it was locked. Conference rooms, supply closets, bathrooms, everything secure. I logged each checkpoint on my clipboard, noting the time and my initials. The first floor took about 15 minutes. Then I headed to the second floor. I took the east stairwell, the one closest to that long corridor Miller had pointed out. When I pushed open the stairwell door, I felt a rush of colder air. The second floor was noticeably colder than the first. I made a mental note to ask about the climate control. The hallway stretched out in front of me, exactly as it had looked on the camera. Dim lighting, shadows pooling between the lit sections, doors lining both sides. I started walking, checking each door as I went. Most were locked. A few opened into dark storage rooms filled with filing cabinets and stacked chairs. About halfway down the corridor, I stopped. I'm not sure why. Something made me pause and look back the way I'd come. The hallway behind me was empty, the stairwell door closed. But I had this strange feeling, like I'd heard something just on the edge of perception. A footstep, maybe, or the sound of a door closing very softly. I stood there for a moment listening. The ventilation system hummed. Somewhere in the walls, pipes creaked as they settled. Nothing unusual. I shook it off and kept walking. When I reached the end of the corridor, I found the west stairwell and took it back down to the ground floor. The third floor could wait until the next round. I wanted to check the camera feeds first. Back in the monitor room, I reviewed the footage from the past 20 minutes. I watched myself walk through the first floor, then move up to the second. I saw myself pause in the middle of that hallway, looking back. On the feed, there was nothing behind me, just an empty corridor. I rubbed my eyes. Miller was right. Nights played tricks on you. The rest of the shift settled into a rhythm. Every hour, I did a sweep. Every hour, the building remained empty and silent. By your 200 hours, I checked every floor, every door, every access point twice over. Everything was secure. But each time I walked down that second floor corridor, I got the same feeling. Like I wasn't alone. Like something was just out of sight, waiting. I told myself it was nothing. New assignment jitters. Unfamiliar environment. Perfectly normal. At 0400 hours, I was back in the monitor room, filling out my log, when I noticed something on the second floor camera feed. I leaned closer to the screen. There, at the far end of the corridor, near the west stairwell, was a shadow. Not a shadow cast by something in the hallway, but a darker patch against the wall, roughly the size and shape of a person. I stared at it for a few seconds. It didn't move. I checked the timestamp. The feed was live. I grabbed my flashlight and radio and headed for the stairs. When I reached the second floor corridor, I moved quickly but quietly. My hand rested on my service weapon, though I didn't draw it. The hallway looked the same as before. dim, empty, cold. I reached the spot where I'd seen the shadow on the camera. There was nothing there. Just wall and a locked door marked Archive Storage B. I tried the handle anyway. Locked. I checked the door frame looking for any sign it had been forced or tampered with. Nothing. I pulled out my radio. "Control, this is Agent Carter, second floor east wing. Investigated a possible visual on camera 2. Negative contact. Corridor is clear." Static crackled back at me. Then, "Copy that, Carter. Return to post." I made my way back to the monitor room and checked the footage again. I rewound to the moment I'd seen the shadow. On the playback, it was there, that dark shape against the wall. But as I watched, it seemed to shift slightly, like it was moving just out of sync with the frame rate. Then, in the span of 3 or 4 seconds, it faded. Not quickly, not like someone walking away, just a gradual dissolution until there was nothing but empty hallway again. I sat back in my chair and felt my pulse hammering in my ears. I told myself it was a camera artifact. Old equipment, weird lighting, something completely explainable. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen something real. The rest of the night passed without incident. When Miller arrived at Doro 600 to relieve me, I almost told him about the shadow, but then I thought about how it would sound. I saw a dark spot on the camera that went away. He'd probably think I was paranoid or overtired, so instead I just gave him the standard report. All clear, no incidents, building secure. Miller nodded, not really listening, already focused on his coffee and the day ahead. I drove home as the sun was rising, trying to convince myself that the first night was always the hardest. Tomorrow would be easier. I was wrong. The second night started the same way. I reported at 2200, got the briefing from Miller, settled into the monitor room. This time, I told myself I'd stay focused, ignore any weird feelings, stick to the routine. For the first few hours, everything went according to plan. I did my sweeps, checked the feeds, logged the checkpoints. The building was quiet, exactly as it should be. But when I reached the second floor corridor during my 100 sweep, I noticed something I hadn't seen the night before. About 2/3 of the way down the hallway, there was a door slightly ajar. Just a crack, maybe an inch of darkness visible between the door and the frame. I approached slowly, my hand on my flashlight. The door had a placard that read, "Storage 217. I was certain I'd checked this door the night before, and it had been locked. I pushed it open slowly. The hinges creaked, the sound absurdly loud in the silence. Inside was a small room, maybe 10 by 10 feet, filled with metal shelving units. Old binders, boxes of files, outdated computer equipment. Everything covered in a thin layer of dust. The room was empty. No one inside, no sign of disturbance. But the door had definitely been closed and locked the night before. I checked the lock mechanism. It was an old-style key lock, not electronic. Someone would have needed a physical key to open it. I made a note on my clipboard to ask Miller about it in the morning. As I was about to leave, my flashlight beam caught something on the floor near the back shelf. Footprints. In the dust. I crouched down to get a better look. They were fresh, or at least recent enough that the dust hadn't settled back over them. The prints led from the door to the back of the room, then stopped. Just stopped, like whoever made them had vanished mid-step. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. I stood up quickly and backed out of the room, pulling the door shut behind me. This time, I made sure it was fully closed and tested the handle. Locked. Back in the monitor room, I reviewed the second-floor camera footage from the past hour. The angle didn't quite reach the door to storage 217, but I could see the section of hallway right in front of it. On the feed, no one had walked past. The corridor had been empty the entire time. I rubbed my face, trying to think logically. Maybe maintenance had been in there during the day and forgot to lock it. Maybe the footprints were old and I just hadn't noticed them before. Maybe the building had settled and the door had popped open on its own. All reasonable explanations. None of them felt right. At 02:30, I did another sweep. This time, when I reached the second floor, I walked straight to storage 217. The door was open again. Not just ajar this time, but fully open, swung wide on its hinges. I stopped in my tracks. My pulse spiked. I definitely had closed that door. I had tested the lock. I had made absolutely certain. I approached cautiously, flashlight up, hand on my weapon. The room looked the same as before. Shelves, boxes, dust. But now there were more footprints. A trail leading from the door to the back shelf, then returning to the door. The same prints, the same pattern, like someone had walked in, stood at the back of the room for a while, then walked out, except no one had walked past the camera. I pulled out my radio. "Control, this is Carter. I need a secondary unit to second floor east wing. I have an unsecured door and possible unauthorized access." The response came back almost immediately. "Copy, Carter. Unit dispatched. ETA 5 minutes." I stayed in the hallway, watching the open door, until Agent Brooks arrived. Brooks was older than me, maybe late 30s, with a no-nonsense demeanor that I found reassuring. "What have we got?" he asked, hand resting on his service weapon. I explained the situation. The door that kept opening, the footprints, the lack of anyone on camera. Brooks listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he walked into the storage room and looked around with his flashlight. He crouched down to examine the footprints, then stood up and checked the shelves. "Dust is thick," he said. "These prints are fresh, couple hours old at most." "But no one came down this hallway," I said. "I've been watching the feed." Brooks walked back to the door and examined the lock. "Key operated. You have access to the key?" I shook my head. Miller didn't give me one. He said all the storage rooms should be locked and stay locked. Brooks pulled out a small notebook and wrote something down. "I'll file a report. We'll get maintenance to check the lock tomorrow, make sure it's functioning properly. Could be a mechanism failure." "What about the footprints?" He looked at me for a moment, and I saw something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe, or caution. "Could be from earlier in the week. Dust settles slow in these old rooms." "They look fresh," I said. "They do," Brooks agreed. "But without anyone on camera, we have to assume there's a reasonable explanation. Maintenance, cleaning crew, someone with authorization we don't know about." He pulled the door closed and tested it. It stayed shut. "Keep an eye on it. If it opens again, call me directly." He wrote his cell number on a page from his notebook and handed it to me. After Brooks left, I went back to the monitor room and watched the feeds with a new intensity. I kept the second-floor camera in the corner of my vision at all times, checking it every few minutes. At 03:47, I saw it happen. On the feed, the door to storage 217 slowly swung open. There was no one near it. No hand pushing it, no figure in the hallway. It just opened, smooth and deliberate, until it was fully ajar. I grabbed my radio and sprinted for the stairs. When I reached the second-floor corridor, the door was open exactly as I'd seen on the camera. I approached with my weapon drawn this time, not taking any chances. "Federal agent, identify yourself." No response. I moved to the doorway and swept the room with my flashlight. Empty. No one inside. But the footprints in the dust had multiplied. Now there were dozens of them, overlapping, crisscrossing like a crowd had gathered in the small space. I backed out of the room, my hands shaking. This wasn't a lock malfunction, this wasn't maintenance. This was something else entirely. I called Brooks. He answered on the second ring, his voice rough with sleep. "The door opened on its own," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I saw it on camera, no one near it, and there are more footprints now, dozens of them." There was a long pause on the other end. Then Brooks said, "I'm coming back. Don't go in that room again. Stay in the hallway and wait for me." He arrived 20 minutes later, this time with another agent I didn't recognize. They both examined the room, took photos of the footprints, checked the door mechanism. I watched from the hallway, my back against the opposite wall, trying to calm my breathing. When they finished, Brooks came over to me. "I'm going to level with you, Carter. This isn't the first time something like this has happened in this building." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" Brooks glanced at the other agent, who nodded slightly. 3 years ago, we had an agent on night shift report a similar incident. Doors opening, footsteps in empty hallways, shadows on the cameras. We did a full security review, checked every system, every lock, every access point. Never found an explanation. What happened to the agent? He requested a transfer after 2 weeks. Said he couldn't work nights here anymore. Brooks paused. "Look, officially, this is probably just old buildings settling, faulty equipment, that sort of thing. But unofficially, a lot of us who work nights here have seen things we can't explain. We just don't talk about it. Why not? Because there's no protocol for it. What are you supposed to put in a report? Door opened by unseen force. You'd be laughed out of the service or sent for a psych eval." I looked back at the open door to storage 217. "So, what do I do?" Brooks put a hand on my shoulder. "You do your job. You log what you can log, and you trust your training. If there's a real threat, you'll know it. Everything else," he shrugged, "everything else is just noise." They left shortly after, and I was alone again. I closed the door to storage 217 one more time, knowing it wouldn't stay closed. For the rest of the shift, I stayed in the monitor room, watching the feeds. The door stayed shut, but now I noticed other things. Small things. A chair in the first floor conference room that seemed to change position between camera checks. A shadow that moved across the third floor hallway when nothing was there to cast it. The faint sound of footsteps coming through the walls when the building should have been silent. When Miller arrived at 0600, I gave him a brief report mentioning the door issue and the maintenance request Brooks was filing. Miller nodded, barely paying attention, already thinking about his own day ahead. I drove home in the full light of morning, but the sunshine didn't make me feel any better. I kept thinking about what Brooks had said. Other agents had seen things. This had happened before, and I still had 5 more nights on this rotation. By the 3rd night, I'd started noticing patterns, not in the building's behavior, but in my own reactions to it. The way my heart rate would spike when I approached the 2nd floor stairwell. The way I'd unconsciously hold my breath while walking down that corridor. The way I checked the monitor feed for that hallway more frequently than any other camera. I was developing a hypervigilance that wasn't healthy, but I couldn't help it. The building demanded attention. This night started differently, though. When I arrived at 2200, Miller wasn't alone in the security office. There was another man with him, someone I didn't recognize. Civilian clothes, briefcase, the look of a bureaucrat. "Carter," Miller said, "this is Davis from building management. He's here about the door issues you reported." Davis stood and shook my hand. His grip was firm, but his palm was sweaty. "Agent Carter, I reviewed the maintenance logs and I wanted to walk through the problem areas with you before your shift starts. If you have a moment?" I looked at Miller, who nodded. "Go ahead. I'll monitor the boards until you're back." Davis and I took the stairs to the second floor. He was breathing hard by the time we reached the landing, loosening his tie slightly. "These old buildings," he said. "Always something." We walked to storage 217. The door was closed and appeared locked. Davis pulled out a ring of keys and sorted through them. "This is the master for all the storage rooms on this floor. According to our logs, only 3 copies exist. Mine, the head custodian's, and the facility's director's." He unlocked the door and we stepped inside. The room looked exactly as I'd last seen it. Shelves and boxes and dust. But the footprints were gone. The floor was undisturbed, a uniform layer of gray dust covering everything. I stared at the floor. "The footprints," I said. "There were dozens of them." Davis looked where I was pointing. "I don't see any footprints, Agent." "They were there. I saw them. Agent Brooks saw them. He took photos." Davis pulled out a tablet and scrolled through something. "I have the photos Agent Brooks submitted with his maintenance request. Would you like to see them?" He turned the tablet toward me. The photos showed storage 217, the door, the shelves. But the floor in the images was clear. No footprints at all. "That's not right," I said. There were footprints everywhere. Overlapping, going to the back shelf and returning. Davis looked at me with what might have been sympathy or might have been doubt. "Agent Carter, I'm not questioning what you saw, but the photographic evidence doesn't support it. It's possible in the low-light conditions, dust patterns can create illusions of disturbance. Both Brooks and I saw them. Agent Brooks's report mentions possible dust patterns and unclear impressions. He didn't confirm footprints definitively." I felt something sink in my chest. Brooks had covered for me. He'd filed the report in a way that wouldn't get me flagged for a psych evaluation, but also hadn't supported my account. Davis checked the door mechanism, the hinges, the lock assembly. He made notes on his tablet, taking photos of various components. "The lock is old but functional. The door frame shows some settling which could cause the latch to not catch properly. I'll have it replaced within the week." "What about it opening on its own?" "Old buildings settle, especially with temperature changes. A door that seems closed might not be fully latched, and then air pressure from the HVAC system can push it open." He said it like he was reading from a manual, like he'd explained this before. We walked back downstairs. Davis shook my hand again before leaving. "The door will be fixed soon. In the meantime, if you see any other issues, document them thoroughly. Photos, video if possible. The more evidence we have, the easier it is to address the problem." After he left, Miller called me into the security office. "Listen, Carter, Davis is good at his job, but he doesn't work nights. He doesn't understand what this building is like when it's empty. You believe me, then? About the footprints?" Miller leaned back in his chair. "I believe you saw something. Whether it was footprints or dust patterns or shadows, I believe you saw it. But for the purposes of official reports, you need to be more careful about how you phrase things. Unusual dust disturbances, not mysterious footprints. You understand?" I understood. They wanted me to self-censor, to translate what I experienced into language that wouldn't raise red flags. "How many agents have worked nights here?" I asked. Miller considered the question. "In the 10 years I've been day supervisor, maybe 20, 25. Most don't last more than a few months before requesting transfer." "And how many have reported incidents?" "Officially, none." He paused. "Unofficially, most of them. At least the ones who talk about it." "Why do you stay, if you know what happens here at night?" Miller smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I work days, Carter. The building behaves differently during the day. It's only at night that it gets active." He stood up and grabbed his coat. "Your shift's starting. Stay alert, document what you can verify, and don't let your imagination run away with you." After Miller left, I settled into the monitor room with a growing sense of dread. The building knew I was documenting it now. Somehow, I felt certain of that, and I wasn't sure how it would respond. The first few hours were quiet. Too quiet. I did my sweeps, checked the doors, logged the checkpoints. Everything normal, everything routine. But the second-floor corridor felt different tonight. The temperature was even colder than before, and the shadows between the lights seemed deeper, more substantial. I moved through my checks quickly, not lingering, not giving myself time to notice details. At 01:30, I was back in the monitor room when I heard something that made my blood run cold. Music. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. It sounded like it was coming from the second floor. I checked the audio monitors, but they showed nothing unusual. The building's ambient sound levels were normal. Yet I could still hear it, a melody I almost recognized, playing somewhere in the building. I grabbed my flashlight and radio and headed up. The music grew louder as I climbed the stairs, and when I opened the door to the second-floor corridor, I realized what I was hearing. A music box playing a slow mechanical version of a lullaby. The sound was coming from storage 217. The door was open, just a crack, and light was spilling out into the hallway. Not the beam of a flashlight, but a soft, yellowish glow like candlelight. I approached slowly, my hand on my weapon. "Federal agent, I need you to identify yourself and step out of the room with your hands visible." The music continued, the same few bars repeating in an endless loop. I pushed the door open with my foot, staying back, weapon drawn now. The room was empty. No people, no light source. But on one of the shelves, in a cleared space that definitely hadn't been there before, sat a small music box. Old, ornate, the kind of thing you'd find in an antique shop. And it was playing. I holstered my weapon and moved closer. The music box was beautiful in a faded way, the paint chipped, the mechanism visible through a cracked panel. As I watched, it wound down, the melody slowing, deepening, until it stopped completely. The silence that followed was absolute. I reached out to pick up the music box, then stopped. Something told me not to touch it. Some instinct that had nothing to do with training or protocol. I pulled out my phone and took photos. The music box from multiple angles, the cleared shelf space, the room itself. Evidence, documentation. As I was taking the last photo, I heard footsteps in the corridor behind me. Quick, light footsteps like someone running. I spun around, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The hallway was empty, but down at the far end, near the west stairwell, a door was closing. I saw just the last few inches of it swinging shut, heard the soft click of the latch. I ran toward it. The door led to an office, one I'd checked multiple times before. It was supposed to be locked, but the handle turned freely under my hand. Inside was a typical government office. Desk, chair, filing cabinets, window overlooking the street. Completely ordinary, except for one thing. The desk was covered in papers. Not files or forms, but personal letters. Handwritten notes. And they were all recent, the dates spanning the last few months. I recognized some of the names in the headers. Staff members who worked in the building during the day. The letters weren't addressed to anyone. They were just thoughts, confessions, fears, things people had written but never sent. And on top of the pile was a sheet of paper with my name on it. Not Agent Carter, my first name. In handwriting I didn't recognize. I picked it up with shaking hands and read, "You see us now. That's good. We need to be seen. We've been here so long, forgotten in the spaces between. The building remembers us even if the living don't. Don't be afraid. We don't mean harm. We just want someone to know we were real." The paper was dated today, written in the past hour, according to the timestamp in the corner. I dropped it back on the desk and backed out of the room. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. "Carter, this is Control. We're showing a motion sensor activation in the second-floor west office. Please confirm your location." I grabbed the radio. "I'm at that location now. The office door was unsecured. I paused. What did I find? Letters that shouldn't exist? A music box that plays by itself? A note addressed to me by someone who isn't there?" "Found what, Carter?" "Maintenance issue," I said finally. "Door lock malfunction. I'm securing the area now." "Copy that. Log it for the morning crew." I closed the office door and tested it. Locked again, as if it had never been open. I went back to storage 217. The music box was gone. The shelf was dusty and undisturbed, just like every other shelf in the room. But on my phone, the photos I'd taken were still there. Clear images of the music box sitting exactly where I'd seen it. I saved the photos to 3 different cloud services. Whatever was happening here, I wasn't going to let them erase the evidence this time. The rest of the shift passed in a state of heightened anxiety. I stayed in the monitor room, watching the feeds obsessively, documenting every small anomaly. A light flickering in sequence that seemed too deliberate to be random. A chair that rotated slightly when no one was near it. Shadows that moved against the direction of the light source. At 05:20, 40 minutes before Miller was due to arrive, all 6 monitors went black simultaneously. Not static, not signal loss, just black screens with no input. I checked the connections, the power, the system logs. Everything showed normal operation. The cameras should have been working. But the screen stayed black for exactly 3 minutes. Then, all at once, they flickered back to life. And there, on the second-floor corridor feed, was a figure. Standing in the middle of the hallway, facing the camera. The same silhouette I'd seen on my first night, but clearer now. I could almost make out features. The suggestion of a face, of clothes, of a person who had once been real. It stood there for 5 seconds. Then it turned and walked toward the west stairwell, moving with a strange gait that didn't quite sync with the frame rate. When it reached the stairwell door, it didn't open it. It simply faded out, becoming transparent and then nothing. I sat frozen, staring at the screen. The hallway was empty again, but I'd seen it. And this time, I had proof. I checked the DVR system, pulled up the recording from those few minutes. The blackout was there, and the figure's appearance was there, captured in digital format. Undeniable evidence. When Miller arrived, I showed him the footage immediately. He watched in silence, his expression unreadable. "This is going to sound strange," he said finally. "But I need you to delete that." "What?" "The footage. Delete it, now." "But it's proof. It shows something that will get this entire facility flagged for a full security review. They'll bring in teams, investigators, equipment. They'll tear this building apart looking for explanations." Miller looked at me directly. "And they won't find any. Because whatever this is, it's not something that can be measured or documented in a way they'll accept. All that will happen is everyone involved gets transferred or dismissed, and the building keeps doing what it's been doing for decades. You've seen this before." It wasn't a question, but Miller nodded anyway. Different forms, different manifestations. But yes, I've seen it. What is it? I don't know, no one does. But I know that bringing official attention to it doesn't help. It just creates problems for the people who work here. I looked at the screen, at the frozen image of the figure in the corridor. If I delete this, I have nothing. Just my word. Your word to who? Who are you going to tell that will believe you? Miller's tone wasn't unkind, just realistic. "Carter, I'm not trying to silence you. I'm trying to protect your career. Delete the footage, work your remaining shifts, then request a transfer. That's how everyone handles this." I thought about the note on the desk. "We just want someone to know we were real." "I need to document this," I said. "Not officially, but for myself. So I know I'm not crazy." Miller considered this. "Document it however you want, but keep it off the government systems, and don't share it with anyone in an official capacity. Understand?" I understood. I copied the footage to a personal drive, then deleted it from the official system. The act felt like betrayal, though I wasn't sure who I was betraying. Miller clapped me on the shoulder. "Get some sleep, only a few more nights to go." But as I drove home in the morning light, I knew sleep wouldn't come easily. The building had shown itself to me clearly now. It wanted me to see, to know, to acknowledge. The question was why, and what would happen when it felt I'd seen enough. The fourth night felt different from the moment I walked through the door. The air pressure seemed wrong, like the building was holding its breath. Every sound was muted, deadened, as if the walls were absorbing noise rather than echoing it. Miller was acting strange too. He barely looked at me during the briefing, rushing through the protocols like he wanted to leave as quickly as possible. "Everything okay?" I asked. He paused at the door, his hand on the frame. "Just remember what I told you. Document what you need to, but keep it personal. Don't make this official." "I won't." He nodded, but didn't leave immediately. "Carter, have you noticed the dates?" "What dates?" "The dates when incidents happen most frequently. I've been tracking them for years. There's a pattern." He pulled out a small pocket calendar, the pages worn from handling. "Every 23 days, there's a spike in activity. Doors opening, equipment malfunctions, sightings. It cycles like clockwork." I felt my stomach tighten. "And tonight is?" "Day 23. Miller met my eyes finally. "It's going to be more active than usual. Just be careful. And if things get too intense, you can call for backup. No one will question it." After he left, I sat in the monitor room and pulled up my own notes from the past few nights. Miller was right. The incidents had been building in frequency and intensity. Night 1, a shadow on the camera. Night 2, the door and footprints. Night 3, the music box and the letters. What would Night 4 bring? I didn't have to wait long to find out. At 23:15, during my first sweep, I found the first-floor conference room had been rearranged. The tables that had been pushed against the walls were now arranged in a circle, chairs positioned around them. It looked like setup for a meeting. I checked the access logs. No one had badged into the building since Miller left. The cleaning crew wasn't scheduled until tomorrow night. Yet someone had moved heavy tables and multiple chairs. I took photos, measured distances, documented everything. Then I carefully pushed the tables back against the walls, returning the room to its normal state. When I came back on my next sweep an hour later, the tables were in a circle again. Same arrangement, same precision, as if my intervention had never happened. This time I left them. Clearly, something wanted that room arranged this way. Fighting it seemed pointless. The second floor was worse. Every door in the long corridor was open, not just storage 217, but all of them. 10 doors, 5 on each side, standing wide open like mouths. I walked down the hallway slowly, checking each room. They were all empty, all showing signs of the same thick dust and abandonment. But in each one, something had been moved or changed. A file cabinet stood open. A chair was turned to face the wall. Papers were scattered on the floor in patterns that almost looked deliberate. In the office where I'd found the letters, The desk was clear now, but written in the dust on the desktop was a single word: tonight. I photographed it, then backed out of the room. As I did, I heard a sound from the far end of the corridor. Not footsteps this time, but voices. Murmuring, indistinct, like a conversation happening just beyond the range of understanding. I moved toward the sound, my flashlight beam sweeping the hallway. The voices seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the walls in ways that made no acoustic sense. As I approached the west stairwell, the voices grew clearer. I could almost make out words now. Names, maybe. Dates. Fragments of sentences that meant nothing out of context. I reached the stairwell door and pressed my ear against it. The voices were definitely coming from inside the stairwell. Multiple voices talking over each other. I opened the door quickly, shining my flashlight in. The stairwell was empty, but the voices continued for just a moment longer before cutting off abruptly, leaving a ringing silence. I closed the door and leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. This was escalating. Whatever presence inhabited this building, it was becoming more bold, more insistent. Back in the monitor room, I reviewed the camera feeds from the past hour. The first floor conference room rearrangement didn't show on camera. One frame showed the tables against the walls, the next frame showed them in a circle. No transition, no movement, just instantaneous change. The second floor corridor showed all the doors standing open, just as I'd found them. But in the playback I could see something I'd missed in person. Shadows moved in the doorways. Not shadows cast by anything, but darker patches that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. And in the stairwell camera feed, during the exact moment I'd heard voices, there was a distortion. The image pixelated and broke apart, then reformed. When it cleared, for just one frame, the stairwell wasn't empty, it was full of people. Figures standing on the stairs, sitting on the landings, crowding the space impossibly. One frame, a 20th of a second, but I saw it. I backed up the footage and went through it frame by frame, there. One single frame showing a stairwell packed with people, and then the next frame showed it empty again. I saved the footage, my hands shaking so badly I almost couldn't operate the keyboard. At 0200, the temperature in the building plummeted. I could see my breath in the monitor room. The heating system was running, I could hear it, but it made no difference. The cold seemed to come from inside the walls themselves. I put on my jacket and gloves, but it didn't help much. This wasn't normal cold. It sank into my bones, making my joints ache. My radio crackled. "Carter?" The voice was distant, broken up by static. I grabbed the radio. "This is Carter. Who is this?" "Carter. It's Brooks. Listen, I'm monitoring the building systems from home and I'm seeing massive environmental anomalies. Temperature drops, power fluctuations. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, just cold. Really cold. I need you to do something for me. Go to the basement level. There's a mechanical room at the east end. Check the main climate control panel. Tell me what the readout says." I didn't want to go to the basement. I hadn't been down there on any of my previous shifts, and the thought of descending into the building's lowest level while it was in this state made my skin crawl. But Brooks sounded genuinely concerned, and checking mechanical systems was technically part of my duties. "Copy that. Heading to the basement now." I took the main stairwell down, my flashlight beam bouncing off concrete walls. The basement was utilitarian, no carpeting or ceiling tiles, just raw building infrastructure. Pipes ran along the ceiling. Cable conduits snaked down the walls. Everything echoed. The mechanical room was at the end of a long corridor that reminded me uncomfortably of the second-floor hallway. Same length, same spacing of lights, same sense of something waiting in the shadows. I found the climate control panel and shined my light on it. The digital readout showed internal temperature as 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal. but my breath was fogging in front of me. The air had to be well below 50 degrees. Brooks, the panel shows 68 degrees. That's impossible. The remote sensors I'm reading show 45 degrees in your location. I believe your sensors. I looked around the mechanical room. In the corner, barely visible in the flashlight beam, was frost. Actual frost forming on the concrete walls. Brooks, there's ice forming down here. This isn't a heating system failure. This is something else. There was a long pause. Get out of the basement, Carter, now. Don't wait, don't investigate. Just get back to the main floor. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and headed for the corridor and stopped. At the far end of the hallway, blocking the way to the stairs, was a figure. Not the shadowy silhouette from the cameras. This was more solid, more defined. A person, or something that had once been a person, wearing what looked like an old suit. The figure stood perfectly still, arms at its sides, watching me. I pulled my weapon. "Federal agent, identify yourself and step aside." The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there blocking the exit. I kept my weapon trained on it and started walking forward. I had to get past it. There was no other way out of the basement. As I approached, details became clearer. The suit was old-fashioned, from the 1950s or 60s maybe. The figure's face was blurred, features indistinct, like an old photograph losing its resolution. 20 feet away, 15 feet, 10 feet. The figure raised one arm and pointed behind me. I spun around, weapon tracking. The corridor behind me was full of them, figures in old suits, old dresses, old uniforms. Dozens of them, standing in the hallway and doorways, emerging from the walls themselves. They weren't advancing. They were just there, present, watching. And they were all pointing at something. I followed their collective gesture and saw what they were indicating. On the wall, written in that same frost that was forming everywhere, were words. "We worked here. We died here. Remember us." The temperature dropped even further. My fingers were going numb. I had to get out. I turned back to the original figure blocking the stairs. It had moved closer, now only a few feet away. Up close, I could see that its face wasn't blurred. It simply had no features. A blank expanse where eyes and nose and mouth should be. "I see you," I said, my voice shaking from cold and fear. "I know you're here. I acknowledge you." The figure tilted its head, as if considering my words. Then it stepped aside. I didn't hesitate. I ran past it, up the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. Behind me, I heard a sound like wind rushing through a tunnel, and then a crash that shook the entire building. I burst out onto the main floor and didn't stop until I was in the monitor room with the door locked. My radio crackled. "Carter! Carter, respond!" "I'm here. I'm out. I'm okay." What the hell happened? Every sensor in the building just went haywire and then flatlined. I looked at the monitors. All 6 screens were showing the same thing. Static. Pure static on every feed. "Brooks, the cameras are down. I have no visual on any part of the building. I'm calling for backup, multiple units. They'll be there in 10 minutes. Just sit tight." But as we talked, the monitors flickered. The static cleared, and the feeds came back online. The basement corridor was empty. No figures, no frost, no writing on the walls. Just a normal basement hallway, properly lit and heated. The second-floor doors were all closed again. The first-floor conference room showed tables pushed against the walls in their normal configuration. Everything looked completely ordinary, except for one thing. On the second-floor corridor feed, written in the dust on the floor in letters large enough to see from the camera, was a message. "Thank you for seeing us." When the backup units arrived, They found nothing unusual. No temperature anomalies, no environmental hazards, no evidence of unauthorized access. The building was secure and normal in every measurable way. I showed them the message on the camera feed, but by the time we got up to the second floor in person, the dust had been disturbed. You could still make out some of the letters, but it was unclear, inconclusive. Brooks arrived in person, brought the footage from the remote monitoring systems. The temperature spike was there, documented and undeniable. But the recovery was so rapid and complete that it defied physical laws. Systems didn't go from 40 degrees to 68 degrees in seconds. It wasn't possible. "I believe you," Brooks said quietly after the other agents had left. "But this can't go in an official report. You understand that, right?" I understood. I was learning the rules of this place, what could be said and what had to remain silent. Brooks left around 04:30. I had 90 minutes left on my shift. I spent them in the monitor room, watching the feeds, documenting nothing. When Miller arrived to relieve me, he took one look at my face and nodded. "Bad night?" "They showed themselves," I said. "All of them, in the basement." Miller sat down heavily. "Yeah, that happens on day 23. That's when they're strongest, when they can make themselves fully visible." "Who are they?" "Workers, probably. People who built this building, maintained it, worked here over the decades. They died, and they stayed. The building remembers them even if we don't. They wanted me to see them, to acknowledge them. And you did. That's good. That's what they need." Miller looked at the monitors. "It should be quieter now. For a while, at least, you gave them what they wanted." I drove home as the sun rose, but I couldn't shake the image of those figures in the basement. The blank faces, the pointing gestures, the writing on the wall. I had one more night on this rotation, one more shift in the West Executive Building. And I already knew I wouldn't be coming back after that. My 5th night, my last night. I arrived at 2200 to find a note from Miller on the monitor room desk. Maintenance replaced all the locks on second floor. Building should be quiet tonight. M. I appreciated the thought, but I doubted new locks would make any difference. This wasn't about security failures or mechanical problems. This was about something that existed outside normal parameters. The first few hours were indeed quiet. I did my sweeps, checked the doors, logged the checkpoints. Everything normal. The second floor corridor felt different, though, less oppressive. The cold was gone, the shadows less deep. It was almost like the building was resting after the intensity of the previous night. At midnight, I settled into the monitor room with coffee and paperwork. Just a few more hours, and I could request my transfer, move to a daytime rotation somewhere else, put this experience behind me. But at 0100, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Don't leave yet, 3rd floor, East office. There's something you need to see." I stared at the message. It had to be someone from the service, probably Brooks. But why wouldn't he call or use the radio? I texted back, "Who is this?" No response. But 2 minutes later, another message. "3rd floor, East office, please." Against my better judgment, I went. The 3rd floor was territory I'd only checked a few times, mostly storage and archived files. The East office was at the end of another long corridor, this one carpeted and quieter than the 2nd floor. The office door was closed but unlocked. I pushed it open slowly. Inside was a space that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. Desk covered in dust, filing cabinets rusted shut, windows so dirty it barely let in light from the street. But on the desk, cleared of dust, was a file folder. I approached cautiously and opened it. Inside were personnel records, old ones from the 1960s and 70s. Photos of people in dated clothes, typed forms. employment histories, and notes, handwritten notes in the margins. Died during building evacuation, 1972. Heart attack in west stairwell, 1968. Fell from second floor window, 1965. 18 names total. 18 people who had died in this building over the decades. Not from violence or malice, but from accidents, medical emergencies, random, tragic chance. At the bottom of the pile was a newspaper clipping from 1973. Federal Building Tragedy, 3 dead in structural collapse. The article described a section of the basement ceiling that had failed during renovations, killing 3 workers instantly. And there, in the margin of the article, written in pencil in fresh-looking handwriting, was a message. We're not ghosts. We're memory. The building remembers us. We stay because we're remembered. Thank you for seeing us. Thank you for knowing we existed. I sat down in the dusty chair and read through all 18 files. I memorized names. John Harrison, maintenance. Sarah Collins, secretary. Thomas Grant, security guard. I gave each person my full attention, acknowledging their existence, their work, their final moments in this place. When I was done, I carefully returned the files to the folder and left it on the desk. As I walked out, I felt the temperature in the office warm slightly, as if some presence had departed, satisfied. Back in the monitor room, I checked the third-floor camera feed. The office door was closed again, but I could see, just barely, a soft light glowing from beneath it for a few seconds before fading completely. The rest of the shift passed in complete silence. No doors opening, no shadows, no anomalies. Just a building settling into its normal nighttime state. When Miller arrived at 0600, I gave him a brief report. Quiet night, no incidents. He nodded, looking relieved. That's good. Sometimes after a heavy night, it goes calm for a while. I packed up my gear, ready to head home. But before I left, I asked, Miller, do you know the names of people who died in this building? Is there a record? He looked at me strangely. There's no official memorial or anything, if that's what you mean. Why? Just curious. Seems like something that should be remembered. Yeah, Miller said quietly. It should be. I drove home that morning knowing I wouldn't be back. I'd already submitted my transfer request. Treasury Department daytime rotation, starting the following week. But I also knew I'd carry those names with me. John Harrison, Sarah Collins, Thomas Grant, 15 others whose faces I'd seen in those old photographs. People who had worked in that building, who had died there, and who somehow remained, held by the building's memory. A week later, Brooks called me. Hey, Carter, wanted to let you know we got someone new on nights at West Executive. Young guy, fresh from training. Has he reported anything? Not yet. He's only been there 2 nights. Brooks paused. But I've been monitoring the systems. There's activity. Same patterns as when you were there. You going to warn him? What would I say? The building's haunted? He'd think I was messing with him. Another pause. Besides, they seem to know what they're doing. They don't hurt anyone. They just want to be seen. Yeah, I said, thinking about those figures in the basement, all pointing at their message. They just want to be acknowledged. I hung up and went back to my new assignment. Treasury was busy, full of people, normal in every way. I worked during the day, went home at reasonable hours, slept through the night without waking to phantom footsteps. But sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that building. About the second-floor corridor and the basement hall and the third-floor office. I think about the people who remain there, trapped not by malevolence but by memory, by the building's unwillingness to let them go completely. And I wonder if being remembered is enough. If having someone know you existed, even in this strange half-life, provides some kind of comfort or purpose, I kept the photos I took, the music box, the dust writing, the figures in the stairwell. Evidence that I haven't shared with anyone except Brooks, who doesn't need convincing. Last week I drove past West Executive late at night. The building was dark except for a few lights. As I watched, I saw a silhouette appear in one of the second-floor windows. It stood there for a moment, and I could swear it raised one hand. Not pointing this time, just waving. I raised my hand in return, knowing it couldn't see me through the tinted windows of my car, but somehow feeling like it could sense the gesture anyway. Then the silhouette faded, and the window was dark again. I drove away, back to my apartment, back to my normal life. But I know the building is still there, still holding its memories, still waiting for the next person to see. And they will see. Everyone who works nights there eventually sees. The question is what they do with that knowledge, whether they acknowledge it or deny it, whether they stay or transfer out. I made my choice. I acknowledged them and I left. But I still carry their names: John Harrison, Sarah Collins, Thomas Grant. 15 others. I remember them. And in that building, late at night, when the corridors are empty and the lights are dimmed, they know they are remembered. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us really want in the end. To be seen, to be known, to be remembered, even after we're gone, especially after we're gone. I still get texts sometimes from that unknown number. Usually just a single word: thank you. I never respond, but I always read them, and sometimes, when I'm alone, late at night, I hear footsteps in my apartment hallway. The same measured rhythm I heard in the West Executive building. I used to check the peephole. I used to worry. Now I just sit quietly and listen until the footsteps fade. Because I understand now. They followed me, but they're not threatening. They're just checking in, making sure I still remember. And I do. I always will. The building made sure of that. My name is Hayes, and I've been with the United States Secret Service for 6 years. I've done protective details, investigative work, and more than my share of night shifts at secure facilities around D.C. I thought I'd seen everything this job had to offer. I was wrong. The assignment seemed straightforward enough. 12-hour night shift at a secure communications facility in Alexandria, Virginia. The building doesn't have a name, just an address that doesn't appear on any maps. It's one of those places where classified information gets processed, encrypted, and transmitted to various government agencies. During the day, it's staffed by analysts and technicians. At night, the building is supposed to be empty except for security. My shift ran from 1800 hours to 0600 hours, Sunday through Wednesday, 4 nights a week. The pay was better than standard rotation, which should have been my first clue that something was off. They always pay more for the positions nobody wants. I reported for my first shift on a Sunday evening in November. The sun was already setting when I arrived, that early winter darkness that makes 6 p.m. feel like midnight. Agent Reynolds, the day shift supervisor, met me at the security desk in the lobby. Reynolds was a woman in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and a manner that suggested she didn't waste time on pleasantries. She walked me through the basics quickly and efficiently. Monitor the access points, check the secure server rooms every 2 hours, log all activities in the official logbook, maintain communication with the Central Command every hour. The building has 4 floors, Reynolds explained, pulling up a schematic on the computer. Ground floor is lobby, security office, and general admin. Second floor is communications equipment and server rooms. Third floor is analyst workstations and conference rooms. Fourth floor is restricted access, executive offices, and classified briefing rooms. You'll need special clearance to access the 4th floor, which you don't have yet. Understood, I said, taking notes. Reynolds pulled out a large logbook, the kind with bound pages and permanent ink. This is critical. Every activity, every check, every incident gets logged here. Time, description, your signature. The logbook is a federal record. It gets reviewed every week by the Oversight Committee. She showed me the previous week's entries. Each page was filled with neat handwriting, times marked precisely, signatures clear and consistent. A complete record of everything that happened during each shift. "Any questions?" Reynolds asked. "Seems pretty straightforward. Has there been any unusual activity recently? Any security concerns I should know about?" Reynolds hesitated, just for a moment. "No, nothing unusual. Just stick to the routine and you'll be fine." That hesitation should have told me something, but I was new to the assignment, eager to prove myself. I let it slide. Reynolds left at 1800 sharp. The moment the door closed behind her, the quality of silence in the building changed. It went from the quiet hush of an office after hours to something deeper, more complete, like the building itself was holding its breath. I settled into the security office and reviewed the camera feeds. 16 monitors showing different areas of the building. Everything looked normal. Empty hallways, dark offices, server rooms with their endless rows of blinking lights. I logged my first entry in the book. 1800, shift begins. Building secure. All systems nominal. Haze. The first few hours passed without incident. I did my rounds at 1900, checking each floor methodically. The building was climate-controlled to protect the equipment, keeping everything at a constant 68 degrees. The air had that processed quality you get in places that are never open to the outside world. At 2000 hours, I checked in with Central Command. "Post 7, this is Agent Hayes, status check, all clear." The response came back immediately. "Copy. Post 7. Next check at 2100. I made my second round at 2030, paying special attention to the server rooms on the second floor. The servers hummed constantly, a white noise that was almost soothing. Everything was functioning normally. Back in the security office, I logged my activities. 2030, second floor check complete. All server rooms secure. No anomalies. At 2200 hours, I noticed something odd. I was reviewing the camera feeds when I saw a flicker on one of the monitors. The third floor hallway camera cut to static for just a second, then came back online. I rewound the feed and watched it again. There, a momentary disruption, less than a second, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. I logged it, 200. Brief signal disruption on camera 9, third floor east corridor. Feed restored immediately. Possible equipment issue. At 2230, I did my scheduled server room check. As I walked through the second floor, I noticed the temperature felt different. Not colder or warmer, but different somehow. Like the air pressure had changed. I checked the climate control panel. Everything showed normal. 68 degrees, 45% humidity, air circulation optimal. But something felt wrong. I continued my rounds, trying to shake off the feeling. The building was playing tricks on me. New environment, night shift adjustment. Perfectly normal. When I got back to the security office at 2300, I sat down to log my check and noticed something that made my blood run cold. The logbook was open to a different page. I had left it open to today's date, November 15th. But now it was open to November 16th, tomorrow's date. And there were entries already written there. Entries in my handwriting. I stared at the page. The handwriting was unmistakably mine, the signature identical to the one I'd written at 1800, but the entries were for times that hadn't happened yet. 0100. Third floor, check complete. Corridor Delta showing temperature fluctuation. 0230. Server room B7 accessed for routine verification. No issues found. 0415. Perimeter check completed. All access points secure. 0545. End of shift protocols initiated. Building status normal. There were more entries. A complete record of a shift I hadn't worked yet. My shift, tonight's shift. Already written, already logged, already signed. I flipped back to today's page, November 15th. My initial entry from 1800 was there, and my subsequent logs, but nothing after 2030. I checked the time, 23:05. I had logged entries up to 2030, but there was nothing for 2200 or 2230, even though I distinctly remembered writing them. I remembered sitting at this desk, pen in hand, recording the camera glitch and the temperature anomaly. But those entries didn't exist. I grabbed the pen and started to write a new entry for 2300, describing what I was seeing. My hand moved across the page, forming words, but when I looked down, the page was blank. The ink wasn't taking. I tried again with the same result. The pen worked fine when I tested it on a separate piece of paper, but on the logbook pages, nothing. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of the November 16th page. Evidence, documentation, something to prove I wasn't losing my mind. Then I called Central Command. Post 7 to Central. I need to report an irregularity. Static crackled on the line. Then a voice I didn't recognize. Post 7, please clarify. What is the nature of the irregularity? The official logbook is showing entries for tomorrow's date. Entries in my handwriting for times that haven't occurred yet. A long pause. Post 7, please repeat. We're not reading you clearly. I repeated the information, speaking slowly and clearly. But even as I did, I felt a strange detachment, like I was watching myself from outside my body. Copy, Post 7, we'll make a note. Continue with standard protocols. They didn't sound concerned. They didn't sound confused. They just acknowledged and moved on, like I'd reported a flickering light or a stuck door. I hung up and looked at the logbook again. The November 16th entries were still there. I flipped back and forth between the pages, confirming that my 2200 and 2230 logs from tonight were simply gone, as if I'd never written them. At 23:45, my radio crackled. Post 7, this is Central Command, time check. I looked at my watch, 23:45, but they'd already checked in with me at 2000. The next scheduled check wasn't until 100. Central, I copy. Time is 23:45 hours. Copy, Post 7. We show 0145 on our end. Can you confirm? I looked at my watch again, 23:45. I looked at the computer clock, 23:45. I pulled out my phone, 23:45. Central, I'm showing 23:45 here. All my timepieces are synchronized. Another pause. Understood, Post 7. Maintain position. We're showing a temporal discrepancy. Stand by. Temporal discrepancy. They had a term for it. Like this was something that happened regularly enough to have official language. I stood up and walked to the window. The parking lot outside showed 3 cars, all belonging to day shift staff who commuted together. The street beyond was quiet, no traffic. A sodium vapor streetlight cast everything in orange. I checked the security cameras. All 16 feeds showed empty building, normal operations, nothing unusual. Except when I looked at the timestamp on the feeds, they read 0147. But my watch still said 23:48. I went back to the logbook. The November 16th page was gone. Just gone. The book jumped from November 15th directly to November 17th. An entire page had vanished, or had never existed. I flipped through the entire logbook, checking every page. November 16th didn't appear anywhere, as if that date had been removed from the official record. My radio crackled again. Post 7, status check. Post 7, all clear. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and hollow. Copy. Your next check-in is at 0300 hours. But it was still 23:51 on my watch. If Central Command was at 0147, and my next check was at 0300, that was only an hour and 13 minutes away. But for me, it was 3 hours and 9 minutes. Time wasn't just running differently. It was running separately for me than for everyone else. I sat down and tried to think logically. Possible explanations. Someone was drugging me and I was experiencing lost time. I was having a psychotic break. I was dreaming. None of those explanations felt right. I looked at the logbook. November 15th entries, then November 17th. I flipped to the 17th and saw entries in handwriting I didn't recognize. A different agent's shift, logging routine activities for 2 days from now. I flipped back further, checking previous dates. The pattern was consistent. Every page had the correct date in sequence. November 14th, November 13th, November 12th. All accounted for, just November 16th was missing. Tomorrow's date. The date that was already logged in my handwriting before it happened, and then disappeared completely. I checked my phone photos. The pictures I'd taken of the November 16th page were gone. Not deleted, just gone. Like they'd never existed. My photo gallery jumped from the previous photo directly to the next one, with no gap. No indication that anything had been removed. At 0000 hours by my watch, I decided to do another patrol. Maybe physical movement would help me make sense of what was happening. I walked through the ground floor first. Everything normal. Then up to the second floor. The server rooms hummed their constant drone. Temperature still showed 68 degrees, but the air felt thick now. Resistant. I continued to the third floor. The hallway stretched in front of me, longer than I remembered. The overhead lights seemed dimmer, the shadows between them deeper. Halfway down the corridor, I stopped. Something made me turn and look back at the stairwell door I'd just come through. The distance was wrong. I'd walked maybe 50 feet, but the stairwell door looked like it was at least 100 feet away. The hallway had stretched without me noticing. I continued forward, toward the far stairwell. The distance to that door seemed normal, but when I glanced back again, the other door had receded even further. The hallway was expanding behind me as I walked. I stopped and pulled out my phone to use the compass app, something to give me objective measurements. But my phone screen was blank. Not dead, not powered off, just blank, no display at all. I pressed the power button, nothing. Held it down for a hard reset, nothing. I looked at my watch. The hands had stopped moving. Frozen at 0004. The hallway lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. But the quality of the light had changed. It was the same brightness, but somehow older, like looking at the world through aged film. I continued walking, counting my steps. 50 paces, 75, 100. The far stairwell door didn't get any closer. The hallway just kept extending in front of me, unspooling like an infinite corridor. Behind me, I heard a door open. I spun around, hand on my weapon. The hallway behind me was empty. All the doors were closed. But I definitely heard it. The distinct sound of a door opening and closing. Then I heard footsteps. Not the echo of my own steps, but new ones, coming from somewhere ahead of me. I turned back toward the far stairwell. The door was opening. Slowly, deliberately, like someone was pushing it open from the other side. A figure stepped through. It was me. I was looking at myself, maybe 50 feet away, walking into the hallway from the stairwell. Same uniform, same posture, same everything. The figure, the other me, didn't seem to notice me. He just walked down the hallway, checking doors, doing a routine patrol. I stood, frozen, watching myself move. The other me reached one of the offices, tried the handle, confirmed it was locked, then continued on. As he got closer, I could see more details. His name badge said Hayes. His watch showed 0147. His movements were mine, efficient and practiced. He walked past me. Not through me, but past me. As if I wasn't there. As if I was invisible. I turned to watch him continue down the hallway. He reached the stairwell door at the far end, the one I'd been trying to reach for what felt like forever. He opened it and disappeared inside. The moment he was gone, the hallway snapped back to normal length. I was standing at the far end, right next to the stairwell door. The distance behind me to the other stairwell looked correct now, maybe 150 feet. I checked my watch. The hands were moving again. 047. My phone screen showed the normal display. 047. The radio crackled. Post 7, time check at 0200 hours approaching. Prepare for status report. I opened the stairwell door and looked down. Empty, no sign of the other me. Just a normal stairwell, concrete and metal rails and fluorescent lights. I went back down to the security office, my mind racing. What I'd just experienced couldn't be explained by fatigue or equipment malfunction. I had seen myself, a version of me from a different time, walking through the same space, unaware of my presence. Back at the desk, I pulled out the logbook. November 16th was there again. The page that had disappeared was back, filled with entries in my handwriting for a shift I didn't remember working. But now there were new entries too, entries that hadn't been there before. 0147. Third floor patrol completed. Encountered temporal overlay. Corridor extension phenomenon observed. Recommend flagging this shift for review. I hadn't written that, but it was in my handwriting. I grabbed the pen and tried to write a new entry. The ink took this time, flowing normally onto the page. I wrote 0150, experiencing severe timeline disruption. Request immediate backup and my hand stopped moving. I couldn't write anymore. The pen was working. My hand could move, but I physically could not form any more words on the page. Some invisible barrier prevented it. I looked at what I'd written. The ink was already fading. As I watched, the words became lighter and lighter until they disappeared completely. The page showed only the previous entries, all in my handwriting, all describing events I didn't remember. The computer monitor flickered. When it stabilized, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The security camera feeds were showing me. In the security office, sitting at the desk, writing in the logbook. But the timestamp on the feed said 323. I was watching myself 3.5 hours in the future. And in that future I was writing in the logbook, calm and methodical, as if nothing unusual was happening. I looked down at the logbook in front of me. The entries continued past 0150, documenting activities through the rest of the shift. My future self had already logged everything. 0323, final server room check completed. All systems operational. 0445, prepared end-of-shift report. No significant incidents to note. 0600, shift concluded. Building secured. Transferred custody to day shift. Hayes. I grabbed my radio. Central, this is post 7. I need immediate extraction. I'm experiencing... Static burst from the radio. So loud, I had to rip the earpiece out. When the static cleared, a voice came through. my voice. Post 7 to Central. 0200 check-in. All secure. No incidents to report. But I hadn't said that. I was still holding the radio, the transmit button not pressed. The voice continued. Copy that, Central. Next check at 0300. I looked at the computer screen. The camera feed showing me in the security office had changed. Now, the timestamp read 0200, and the version of me on screen was putting down the radio, exactly as if I'd just finished the call I'd heard. I stood up, backing away from the desk. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But I knew it was. Somehow, I was unstuck in time. Jumping forward, seeing different versions of myself existing in different moments, all overlapping in the same space. The lights in the security office dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again. Each time they changed, I saw the room differently. Once with me at the desk. Once with the room empty. Once with someone else sitting there, an agent I didn't recognize, working a shift that wasn't mine. I closed my eyes, trying to center myself. When I opened them, the room was normal again. I was alone, the clock showed 2:03, and everything looked ordinary, except for the logbook. November 16th was gone again. The pages jumped from the 15th to the 17th with no indication anything was missing. I picked up the logbook and carried it with me as I left the security office. I needed to see something real, something solid, something that existed in normal time. I walked to the main entrance and looked out at the parking lot. The same 3 cars, the same street light, the same empty street. But the sky was wrong. It should have been full dark, stars visible if there weren't so much light pollution. Instead, the sky had a gray quality, like pre-dawn twilight. Yet my watch showed 02:05. Hours until sunrise. I went back inside and pulled out my phone. No signal, no network. The date display showed November 16th. I took the stairs to the second floor, thinking maybe the server rooms would give me something concrete to hold on to. Equipment doesn't lie. Hardware operates according to fixed principles. The server room required a key card. I swiped mine, and the door unlocked with its usual click. I stepped inside. The servers were all off. Not just powered down, but completely inert. No lights, no hum, no heat, like they'd been unplugged for months. I moved between the rows, checking panel after panel, everything dead. But on the security cameras, these same server rooms had shown normal operations. Lights blinking, systems running. I left the server room and went back to check the camera feeds. On the monitors, the server rooms looked active. I could see the indicator lights, the status displays, everything functioning normally. I went back upstairs and looked directly at the servers. Dead. Back downstairs to the monitors. Active. The building was showing me 2 different realities simultaneously. I sat down at the security desk and tried to think. The logbook entries described a normal shift, uneventful, routine. But what I was experiencing was anything but normal, unless the normal shift hadn't happened yet, unless I was experiencing events out of sequence, and the real shift, the one that would be logged and recorded and remembered, was still to come. But if that was true, what was I doing right now? What was this version of the night? This experience that nobody would ever record? At 0300, my radio crackled. Post 7, status check. I grabbed the radio and transmitted. Central, this is Agent Hayes. I need to report. But what came out of my mouth didn't match what I intended to say. My voice, speaking on its own, said, Post 7, all clear. No incidents. I tried again, forcing the words. I'm experiencing timeline disruption. I need... But again, my voice transmitted something different. Everything normal. Next check at 400. I wasn't in control of what I was saying. My future self was speaking through me, delivering the reports that had already been logged, that had already happened according to some version of reality I hadn't experienced yet. I dropped the radio and looked at my hands. They were fading, not disappearing but becoming translucent. I could see the desk through them. I was being edited out of this timeline. The version of me that was logged, recorded, and official was overwriting the version of me that was experiencing these anomalies. Reality was correcting itself, removing the inconsistency. I grabbed the logbook and flipped to November 16th. The page was there again, but this time I could see through it. The paper itself was becoming transparent. I tried to write in it, to add my own entry, to document what was really happening. But the pen passed through the page without leaving a mark. I was already too insubstantial to affect the record. The security office around me was changing. The walls looked newer, the equipment different. I was seeing the building at different times, different eras, all layered over each other like multiple exposures on the same photograph. In one version, I was sitting at the desk, filing routine paperwork. In another, the office was empty. In another, it was under construction, plastic sheeting and power tools visible. All of these times existed simultaneously. All of them were equally real and equally present, and I was slipping between them, unable to anchor myself to any single moment. At a 400, the lights went out completely. Not a power failure, but total darkness, absolute black. In the darkness, I heard voices, multiple versions of myself, speaking different words at different times, all overlapping. Post 7, all clear. I need backup. Something's wrong. Shift concluded without incident. Please, someone help me understand. Building secured for the night. I'm trapped in time. I'm seeing all of my voices, all of my experiences, all existing in the same space but in different moments, unable to reach each other, unable to help each other. Then the lights came back on. The security office looked normal again. I checked my watch, 0403. My hands were solid again, no longer translucent. The logbook sat on the desk, open to November 15th. My entries from earlier in the shift were there, neat and complete, ending at 0400. I logged the next entry. 0403. Experienced significant disorientation. Recommend medical evaluation if symptoms persist. The ink took. The words stayed visible. I was existing in normal time again, at least for the moment. But I knew it wouldn't last. Whatever was happening to me, whatever this building was doing to time itself, wasn't finished. I decided to test something. I grabbed a blank piece of paper and wrote the date and time at the top. November 15th, 0405. Then I wrote, "If I lose time again, this note proves I was aware during the gap." I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. Physical evidence that existed outside the logbook, outside the official record. At 0415, I did another patrol. This time, I paid close attention to details, looking for signs that time was behaving strangely. The building felt normal. The floors had the right number of rooms, the hallways were the correct length, the server rooms hummed with their usual drone. Everything appeared ordinary. But when I returned to the security office at 0435 and checked the camera feeds, I saw something that confirmed my worst suspicions. On the third floor camera, there was someone walking the hallway. The figure was dark, shadowy, difficult to make out clearly, but the gait was familiar. The posture, the way of moving. It was me, again, another version of me, existing in the same building at the same time. I grabbed my radio and my flashlight and headed up to the third floor. When I burst through the stairwell door, the hallway was empty, but I could hear footsteps, fading away, as if someone had just turned a corner. I followed the sound, moving quickly but quietly. The footsteps stayed just ahead of me, always just out of sight. I rounded corner after corner but never caught up. Finally, I stopped in the middle of a hallway and called out, "Hayes, I know you're there. I know you're me. We need to talk." The footsteps stopped. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, from somewhere ahead of me, I heard my own voice. "You can't talk to yourself across timelines. It creates paradox." "I don't care about paradox," I shouted. "I need to know what's happening. Why is time breaking down?" "It's not breaking down." My voice, coming from empty air. "It's consolidating. All the versions of tonight are collapsing into the official record. The shift that gets logged is the only one that will exist when the process is complete." What about me? What about what I'm experiencing right now? You're a deviation, an anomaly. You weren't supposed to be aware of the process. Most agents aren't. They work their shift, log their activities, and never notice the editing. I felt cold understanding wash over me. This happens every shift? Every night in this building? Every night. The building exists in multiple timelines simultaneously. It's a side effect of the communications equipment, the encryption protocols. They fold space-time to ensure secure transmission, but the folding creates overlap. Multiple versions of the same shift happening in parallel. And the logbook? The logbook is the anchor. Whatever gets written there becomes the official timeline. Everything else gets edited out, smoothed over, made to have never happened. I leaned against the wall, my mind reeling. Why am I aware of it? Why can I see the other timelines? I don't know. My voice from the empty hallway sounded tired. Maybe you're sensitive to temporal distortion. Maybe it's random. But being aware makes it worse. The building will try harder to edit you out. I saw myself becoming transparent. That's the editing process. You're being removed from this version of reality. When it's complete, you'll only exist in the logged timeline. You won't remember any of this. You'll remember a normal, routine shift, nothing unusual. I don't want to forget. You don't have a choice. Sadness in my own voice, echoing back to me from someone who was me but wasn't. The building always wins. The record always takes precedence. Why are you telling me this? A long pause. Because I remember. Somehow, part of me remembers. And I think you need to know even if you won't remember later. You need to know that what you're experiencing is real. The hallway lights flickered. When they stabilized, I was alone. No footsteps. No voice. Just empty corridor. I went back to the security office and sat at the desk, staring at the logbook. The November 16th entries were back, written in my handwriting, describing a shift I couldn't remember working. I pulled out the note from my pocket, the one I'd written at 0405. The paper was there, but when I unfolded it, the page was blank. The ink had vanished or had never existed. I grabbed a pen and tried to write on the blank paper. The ink flowed normally. I wrote, "The building at its time. The logged shift is all that will remain." I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket, knowing it would probably be blank again soon, but needing to try. At 0500, Reynolds called on the radio. "Post 7, this is Reynolds. Early check-in, how's the shift going?" I picked up the radio. "Reynolds, I need to ask you something. Did you ever experience temporal anomalies during your shifts here? Lost time, overlapping moments?" Static. Then, "Post 7, I'm not reading you clearly. Can you repeat?" I tried again, speaking slowly and clearly. "Have you ever noticed anything strange about time in this building?" More static. "Post 7, you're breaking up. Try again at the next scheduled check-in." She couldn't hear me. Or the building wouldn't let her hear me. Any attempt to communicate what was really happening got scrambled, translated into static, lost in transmission. I looked at the computer screen. The camera feeds were all showing normal operations. Nothing unusual. A quiet night at a secure facility, exactly as it should be. But I knew better now. I knew that beneath the surface, time was folding and unfolding. Multiple versions of reality playing out simultaneously, all but one destined to be edited into non-existence. At 0530, I started end-of-shift protocols. I checked all the systems one final time, secured the files, prepared the handover documentation. Everything by the book. Everything normal. Except I knew none of this was real. The shift I was completing wasn't the shift that would be logged. Tomorrow, when I tried to remember tonight, I would recall something different. Something official and recorded and devoid of anomalies. The version of me that experienced the truth would be edited out, replaced by a version that saw nothing unusual. At 0545, I made my final logbook entry. Shift concluded. Building secured. All systems normal. Haze. The moment I finished writing my signature, I felt something shift. The air pressure changed, like a great weight lifting. The lights seemed brighter, the shadows less deep. The quality of time itself felt different, more linear, more stable. I looked at the logbook. November 16th was gone again. The pages jumped directly from the 15th to the 17th. My watch showed 547, but I had a memory now, faint and dreamlike, of working a complete shift. Walking the corridors, checking the servers, logging routine activities. A normal night. Nothing unusual. Except that memory was false. I knew it was false because I could still remember the real events, the temporal overlaps, the conversations with myself across timelines. I was holding two conflicting sets of memories, and I could feel one set trying to overwrite the other. At 0600, Reynolds arrived to relieve me. She looked the same as always, professional and efficient. "How was the shift?" she asked. I opened my mouth to tell her everything. The timeline disruptions, the missing logbook pages, the multiple versions of myself. But what came out was, quiet night, no incidents. I tried again, forcing different words. "Reynolds, listen to me. The building does something to time. You need to..." But my voice betrayed me again. "All systems checked out. Building is secure for day shift." I couldn't tell her. The building wouldn't let me. Any attempt to communicate the truth got translated into routine pleasantries. Reynolds nodded, already focused on the computer screens. "Good. See you tomorrow night." I gathered my things and headed for the door. As I walked across the parking lot to my car, I pulled out my phone to check my photos, looking for the pictures I'd taken of the November 16th logbook page. The photos weren't there. My gallery showed no gaps, no missing files, just a continuous record of normal images with nothing out of place. I got in my car and sat behind the wheel, gripping it hard enough to make my knuckles white. I could still remember the overlapping timelines, the conversations with myself, the gradual editing of reality, but already the memories were fading, taking on that dreamlike quality that suggested unreality. Had it really happened? Or had I just experienced some kind of stress-induced hallucination? I pulled out of the parking lot and drove home through the early morning streets. The city was waking up, businesses opening, people starting their day. Everything normal and mundane and real. And I was carrying memories of a night that, according to all official records, never happened. The next night, Sunday, I reported for my shift with a sense of dread. I'd spent the day trying to convince myself that the previous night had been some kind of stress reaction or fatigue-induced confusion. But deep down, I knew what I'd experienced was real. Reynolds greeted me with her usual efficiency. "Evening, Hayes. Quiet day, nothing to report." I wanted to ask her if she'd ever lost time, ever seen the logbook pages change, ever felt like she was being edited out of reality. But I couldn't find the words. Every time I tried to form the question, my mind went blank. After Reynolds left, I settled into the security office and pulled out the logbook. I flipped through the pages carefully, checking each date. November 15th was there, with my entries from 2 nights ago. November 17th showed entries from tomorrow's shift, written by an agent whose name I didn't recognize. Collins. But November 16th, last night's date, simply didn't exist in the book. I checked my own memory. I could remember working last night. I remembered a quiet shift, routine patrols, nothing unusual. But I also remembered something else, something that felt more like a dream. Temporal overlaps, missing pages, conversations with myself. 2 sets of memories, incompatible with each other, both claiming to be real. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. I typed, "If time breaks again, read this. Last night was real. The building at its time. Trust what you experience, not what you're told." I saved the note and set it as a pinned message so I couldn't miss it. At 1900, I started my first patrol. The building felt normal, perfectly ordinary, just hallways and offices and equipment. Nothing sinister. But as I walked the 3rd-floor corridor, I noticed something. On one of the office doors was a placard that read, "Communications Director Collins." Collins, the name that would be in tomorrow's logbook. An agent who would work the shift after mine. I tried the door, locked. But through the small window I could see the office was occupied. Someone was sitting at the desk writing something. I knocked on the window. The figure at the desk didn't respond, didn't even look up. Just kept writing. I knocked harder. "Hey, this floor is supposed to be empty." No response. The figure continued writing, oblivious to my presence. I used my master keycard to unlock the door and pushed it open. The office was empty, no desk, no chair, no person. Just an unfurnished room with blank walls. But through the window I could still see the figure sitting there, writing. I stepped back into the hallway and looked through the window again. The figure was clearly visible, hunched over paperwork. I opened the door. Empty room. I was seeing 2 realities again. One where the office was occupied, one where it was empty. And I could perceive both simultaneously. I closed the door and continued my patrol, my heart rate climbing. It was starting again. Time was fracturing around me. Back in the security office at 1930, I logged my activities. The pen worked fine, the ink took normally. Everything seemed stable. But when I looked at the entry I'd just written, I saw something that made my breath catch. My handwriting, but different words than I'd intended. I'd written, 1930, 3rd floor check. All offices secure, no anomalies. But I'd meant to write, 1930, 3rd floor check. Saw figure in office 312. Door showed empty room but window showed occupied. Temporal overlay beginning again. My hand had written the official version while my mind was thinking the truth. I grabbed a new pen and tried again on a separate piece of paper. I wrote, "The building is changing what I write." I looked at the paper. It read, "Standard patrol completed. Nothing to report." My hands were writing things my mind wasn't composing. The editing was happening in real time now, translating my attempts to document the truth into bland official language. At 2000, I checked in with Central Command. Post 7, status check, all clear. But I hadn't pressed the transmit button. The radio had broadcast on its own, speaking with my voice but without my intention. I tried to override it, to speak my own words. "Central, I need to report timeline." but my voice continued smoothly as if I hadn't tried to interrupt. Everything normal. Next check at 2100. I was losing control of my own actions. The official version of me was taking over, performing the shift that would be logged and recorded while my conscious awareness became just a passenger. At 2100, I was doing a server room check when I saw him. Another version of myself, standing at the far end of the room, checking the equipment panels. This version of me didn't seem aware of my presence. He moved through his duties mechanically, efficiently, logging information on a tablet. I walked closer. "Hayes, I know you can hear me." The other me didn't respond. He just continued working, checking gauges, noting readings. I reached out to touch his shoulder. My hand passed through him like he was made of mist. He was there but not solid, occupying the same space but in a different timeline. I pulled out my phone and tried to take a picture. But when I looked at the screen, the photo showed an empty server room. The other me didn't appear in the image. I was the only one who could see him. Or I was seeing across timelines, perceiving versions of the shift that existed in parallel to my own. The other me finished his check and walked toward the door. As he passed, he suddenly stopped and turned to look directly at me. For a moment, our eyes met. His expression showed confusion and recognition. Then he spoke. "You're still aware?" "Yes," I said. "Are you?" "I think so, but I'm not sure which version is real. Am I the one logging the official shift, or are you?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe we both are. Maybe there are dozens of versions of us, all working this shift simultaneously, all thinking we're the real one." The other me looked troubled. "If that's true, which one survives? Which version gets to keep existing when the timelines consolidate?" Before I could answer, he flickered and vanished. Just gone, like a candle blown out. I stood alone in the server room, surrounded by humming equipment, feeling more isolated than I'd ever felt in my life. At 2200, I found myself back at the security desk with no memory of returning there. I'd lost 10 or 15 minutes, a gap in my awareness where my body had apparently continued working while my consciousness was absent. I checked the logbook. New entries had appeared, written in my hand documenting activities I didn't remember doing. 21:30. Checked external perimeter. All access points secure. 21:45. Responded to motion sensor alert on second floor. False alarm, equipment adjustment. I had no recollection of any of this. But the logged version of me had apparently experienced these events and recorded them faithfully. I was splitting. My awareness and my physical actions were diverging, becoming separate entities. The official me was performing the shift while the conscious me was trapped in a state of disconnected observation. At 2300, I decided to try an experiment. I went to the third floor and positioned myself in the middle of the long corridor. Then I waited. According to the pattern I'd observed, I should see myself patrolling this hallway at some point. Another version, in another timeline, performing the same duties. I waited. 5 minutes, 10, 15, then I heard it. Footsteps on the stairs. The door at the far end opened and I saw myself walk through. This version of me moved purposefully down the corridor, checking doors. When he reached the middle, where I was standing, he walked right through me. No collision, no acknowledgement. He occupied the same space I did, but in a different slice of time. I turned and followed him, watching myself work. He was thorough, professional, exactly as I would be, but his movements had an automated quality, like he was following programming rather than making conscious decisions. When he reached the end of the corridor and entered the stairwell, I tried an experiment. I ran ahead, taking a different route, and positioned myself at the bottom of the stairs before he could get there. The door opened and he emerged. I stood directly in his path. He walked through me again without slowing down, without any indication that he perceived me at all. But as he passed through my position, I felt something. A jolt of connection, a momentary overlap of consciousness. For just an instant, I could feel what he was feeling, think what he was thinking. He wasn't aware of the temporal anomalies. His experience was of a normal shift, routine and unremarkable. He was content, calm, doing his job well. He was the version that would be preserved, the version that matched the official record. And he had no idea that other versions of himself were struggling with the knowledge of what the building really was. At midnight, I sat in the security office and wrote a note to myself on a piece of paper. You are aware of the timelines. Don't let them make you forget. I folded the note and put it in my breast pocket, right over my heart. Maybe proximity to something vital would help it survive the editing process. At 0100, my radio came to life with a voice I didn't recognize. Agent Hayes, this is Agent Collins. Can you read me? Collins, the agent who would work tomorrow night's shift. Collins, this is Hayes. You're not scheduled until tomorrow. Why are you on this channel? Tomorrow? Collins sounded confused. Hayes, it's Monday night. I'm here for my shift. Why are you still on this frequency? I looked at my watch. Sunday night, 0105. Collins, it's still Sunday. You're a day early. No, Hayes, it's Monday. November 17th. You should have clocked out hours ago. I pulled out my phone. The date display showed November 17th, but that was impossible. I'd just started my shift 4 hours ago. It was still Sunday, still November 16th. Except, according to my phone, an entire day had passed without me experiencing it. Collins, listen to me carefully. The building does something to time. If you're experiencing anything unusual, any missing time or temporal overlaps, you need to document it however you can. Static. Then, Hayes, you're not making sense. Are you feeling all right? Should I call for medical support? No, I'm fine. Just be careful. Pay attention to the logbook and don't trust your memories of the shift. They might not be real. Hayes, I'm going to report this conversation. You sound like you're having some kind of episode. The connection cut off. I was alone again with the humming equipment and the impossible date on my phone. I went to the logbook. The page for November 16th was there now, but all the entries were written in a hand I didn't recognize. Collins' handwriting. He'd already worked the shift I thought I was currently working. I flipped to November 17th. Empty pages waiting to be filled. No, that wasn't right. I flipped back. November 15th had my entries. November 16th had Collins' entries. November 17th was blank. But I'd been working November 16th. I was sure of it. I'd reported at 1800 on Sunday, November 16th. Except now, all the evidence said today was Monday the 17th. And I was working Monday's shift. And Sunday's shift had already been completed by Collins. An entire day had been edited out of my experience. I'd lost Sunday, lost my shift, lost a full rotation of the Earth. I pulled the note from my pocket, the one I'd written at midnight reminding myself that I was aware of the timelines. The paper was blank. I was being erased systematically. Not just edited, but removed entirely. Soon, there would be no evidence I'd ever been aware of the temporal anomalies. I would just be another agent working routine shifts, logging standard activities, never noticing the impossible folding of time that surrounded me. At 200, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside the security office. I looked at the camera feed. The hallway was empty, but the footsteps continued getting closer. The doorknob turned. I stood up, hand on my weapon, facing the door. It opened slowly, and I saw myself walk in. Not a past or future version. Not a temporal echo, but me right now, in this moment, walking through a door I was watching from the other side. We stared at each other. Same uniform, same age, same expression of confusion and fear. "Which one are you?" I asked. "The one working Monday night," he said. "Which one are you?" I thought I was working Sunday night, but now I think I'm working Monday too. We both looked at the logbook. It showed Monday's date, November 17th, with no entries yet. A blank shift waiting to be logged. "We're the same shift," the other me said. "We've been split into separate awareness, but we're both living the same hours. When time consolidates, only one of us will remain." "How do we know which one?" He shook his head. "We don't. Maybe neither of us. Maybe a third version we can't see, the one that's logging everything normally without noticing any of this." He walked closer, and I noticed he wasn't casting a shadow. The overhead lights passed through him like he wasn't fully solid. "You're fading," I said. "So are you," he replied, pointing at me. I looked down at my hands. He was right. I could see the desk through them, faint but definite. I was becoming translucent. "The timeline is choosing," I said. "It's deciding which version to keep. Or it's discarding both of us." He sat down in the chair, or tried to. He passed partially through it before finding solidity. "Maybe we're both the anomalies. Maybe there's an official version of this shift happening right now that we can't see, and we're just glitches being edited out." The lights flickered. When they stabilized, the other me was gone. I was alone in the security office, becoming more transparent with each passing second. I grabbed the logbook and tried to write something, anything, to anchor myself to this reality. But the pen passed through the page without leaving a mark. I was too insubstantial now to affect physical objects. I was becoming a ghost in my own shift. At 0300, I couldn't feel the floor anymore. I was standing on it, or I thought I was, but there was no sensation of contact. I was present, but not participating. Observing, but not affecting. I walked through the building, passing through walls and doors like they were made of mist. I could see everything, but interact with nothing. On the second floor, I saw another version of myself doing a server room check. He was solid, corporeal, real. He logged his activities on a tablet, then left the room through the door like a normal person. That was the version that would survive. The one who experienced nothing unusual, who had no awareness of the temporal folding, who would log a routine shift and remember nothing strange. I tried to speak to him, to warn him, but no sound came out. I was beyond sound now, beyond matter. Just a consciousness drifting through a building that no longer acknowledged my existence. At 0400, I found myself in the security office without having walked there. I was just there, sitting at the desk or hovering near it. I couldn't quite tell which. The logbook was open, filled with entries in my handwriting. A complete record of a normal shift, everything logged properly, everything routine. I had no memory of writing any of it. On the computer screen I could see the time, 0403. In 3 hours, the shift would end. Day shift would arrive. And whatever version of me existed in that future would hand over custody of the building with no awareness that anything strange had happened. I would forget, or I already had forgotten, or I'd never known. Time was so tangled now I couldn't tell what was memory and what was premonition. At 0500, I felt myself starting to fade completely. Not just visually, but existentially. The building was finishing its editing, removing the anomaly, smoothing over the glitch. Soon, I would simply cease to be, and only the official version would remain. I made one last attempt to leave evidence. I tried to write on the wall, scratch something into the desk, leave any mark that would prove I'd been aware. But I couldn't affect anything. I was less than a ghost. I was a memory. The building was actively forgetting. The last thing I remember from that night was watching the sun come up through the window. Dawn light filling the security office, illuminating the desk and the logbook and the empty chair. No one sitting there. The shift already ended. Day staff arriving, going about their normal routines, never knowing that something impossible had just occurred in the building they worked in. And me, watching from nowhere, from a slice of time that didn't exist in any official record. Then, even that faded. I woke up in my car in the parking lot. The sun was high overhead, mid-afternoon by the look of it. My phone showed 14:30 hours, Monday, November 17th. I had no memory of how I got there. The last thing I clearly remembered was starting my shift Sunday night at 1800. Everything after that was confused, fragmented, like trying to remember a dream. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages. I pulled up my work schedule. It showed I'd worked Sunday night as planned, then called in sick for Monday night's shift. But I had no memory of calling in sick. I had no memory of leaving the facility. I had no memory of the last 20 hours. I drove home slowly, trying to piece together what had happened. The harder I tried to remember, the more the memories slipped away, replaced by a vague sense of routine and normalcy. By the time I reached my apartment, I'd convinced myself that I must have caught some kind of bug, worked through it Sunday night, then gone home sick Monday morning. That made sense. That was logical. The other memories, the temporal overlaps, the fading reality, the multiple versions of myself, those were clearly just stress-induced hallucinations. Fever dreams, nothing real. I spent Monday evening resting, convinced I'd just had a rough shift and let my imagination run wild. Tuesday, I reported for my shift as usual. Reynolds briefed me on the usual protocols. Everything normal. I settled into the security office and pulled out the logbook. I flipped to Sunday, November 16th, to review my entries from that shift. The page wasn't there. The logbook jumped from November 15th to November 17th with no indication anything was missing. I stared at the impossible gap. A full day, missing from the official record. My shift, the one I'd worked 2 nights ago, simply didn't exist according to the logbook. I flagged down Reynolds before she could leave. The logbook is missing a page. November 16th. She looked at the book, flipped through it carefully. I'm not seeing any missing pages, Hayes. The dates are sequential. But Sunday's shift isn't here, the 16th. Reynolds looked at me oddly. Hayes, the 16th was Monday. You called in sick, remember? Collins covered your shift. His entries are right here, November 16th. She pointed at the page. It clearly showed November 16th, with entries and handwriting I didn't recognize. Collins's shift. That's not right, I said. I worked Sunday the 16th. I remember starting my shift. Hayes, Sunday was the 15th. You worked that shift. Here are your entries. Then you called in sick Monday the 16th. Collins covered for you. And today is Tuesday the 17th, your regular shift. See? All accounted for. She showed me the calendar. She was right. November 16th had been a Monday. Sunday was the 15th. But I had crystal clear memories of reporting for work on Sunday the 16th. I remembered Reynolds briefing me. I remembered the date on the logbook. Except now, all evidence showed I was wrong. The calendar, the logbook, Reynolds' account, everything contradicted my memory. Are you feeling all right? Reynolds asked, concerned now. Maybe you should take another night. You might still be sick. No, I'm fine, I said quickly. Just confused about dates. I'll be fine. After she left, I sat in the security office and pulled out my phone. I checked my work logs, my personal calendar, everything I could think of. They all showed the same thing. I'd worked Friday the 14th, Sunday the 15th, and was now working Tuesday the 17th. The 16th had been my scheduled night off. I'd called in sick, and Collins had covered. But I didn't remember calling in sick. I didn't remember being sick on Monday. I remembered working Sunday night, the 16th. I remembered temporal anomalies, overlapping timelines, multiple versions of myself. Two conflicting sets of memories, both claiming to be real, but only one supported by evidence. I tried to call Collins to ask him about his shift on the 16th, but there was no Collins in the facility directory. I checked the logbook again. The entries for the 16th were clearly there, but I couldn't read them. Every time I tried to focus on the words, they seemed to blur and shift. At 2100, I did my first patrol. The building felt normal. I checked the third floor, walked past Office 312. The placard on the door read Storage Room 312. No mention of any Collins. I opened the door. Empty storage space exactly as it should be. I walked the entire floor, checking every office. None of them showed any signs of recent occupancy. They all had that abandoned quality of spaces that hadn't been used in years. Yet someone named Collins had supposedly worked a shift here Monday night and logged the activities in the official book. Back in the security office, I tried an experiment. I grabbed a pen and wrote in the logbook, 2115, third floor check. Investigated discrepancy regarding missing shift log. I watched the words as I wrote them. They looked normal, permanent ink on official paper. I looked away for a moment, then looked back. The entry had changed. It now read, 2115, third floor check. All offices secure. No anomalies. I grabbed the pen and immediately wrote below it. Previous entry altered. Building is editing the logbook in real time. I kept my eyes fixed on the words, refusing to look away. But even as I watched, the letters began to shift and rearrange. Within seconds, the entry read, 2120, continued patrol. Everything normal. The building was actively rewriting the record while I watched, not even trying to hide it anymore. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the page before it could change again. The photo showed normal entries. Nothing about alterations or editing. The building was changing reality itself. Not just records, but perception, memory, everything. At 2200, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I grabbed my flashlight and weapon and went to investigate. The third floor corridor was empty, but the footsteps continued. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing in impossible ways. I followed the sound to Office 312. The door was closed, but I could hear someone moving inside. I used my keycard to open it. The room was empty. Just bare walls and concrete floor. But the sounds continued. Footsteps, papers rustling, a chair scraping. I stood in the center of the empty room and listened to sounds that had no source. Activity from a timeline that didn't exist, bleeding through into mine. Collins, I called out. I know you're here. I know you worked Monday night. I need to know what you experienced. The sounds stopped. Complete silence. Then, very faintly, I heard a voice. My voice. There is no Collins. There never was. That shift doesn't exist. We don't exist. Who am I talking to? I asked the empty room. You're talking to yourself. The version of you that worked the shift that never happened. The version the building edited out. If you were edited out, how can you still exist? I don't exist. Not really. I'm just an echo, a remnant that got caught in the machinery. A ghost of a shift that was removed from the timeline. I felt cold understanding settle over me. The building doesn't just edit logbooks. It edits reality itself. Entire shifts just ceased to have ever happened. Yes, my voice from empty air. And the people who work those shifts ceased to have ever worked them. Their experiences, their memories, their very existence during those hours, all removed, smoothed over, made to have never been. But I remember working Sunday the 16th even though everyone says I called in sick. You remember because you were there. You're one of the echoes now. The building couldn't completely erase you. Part of you remains, aware of what was taken. How many others are there? How many shifts have been erased? Look at the logbook, really look at it. Not at the pages that are there, but at the spaces between them. I went back to the security office and examined the logbook carefully. The binding, the page edges, the thickness of the book. It was too thin. A year's worth of daily entries should have made the book much thicker. But it was barely half an inch, maybe 200 pages. I counted the pages. The book jumped from one date to another with irregular gaps. November 15th, 17th, 19th, 22nd, 25th. Random dates included, others missing. No pattern I could discern. But when I tried to flip to the missing dates, my fingers found no purchase. The pages weren't there to turn to. They'd been removed so completely they'd never existed. Dozens of shifts, maybe hundreds over the years, just gone. Edited out of the record, out of time, out of existence. And the agents who'd worked those shifts, where were they? "We're here," my voice said from the empty security office, though I was the only one visible in the room. All of us, the ghosts of shifts that never happened. We exist in the spaces between, aware but unable to affect anything, watching the living work shifts that will be logged while ours never were. How do I avoid ending up like you? You can't. It's already happened. Part of you is already here with us. The part that experienced Sunday the 16th. You just haven't fully realized it yet. I looked down at my hands. They were solid, corporeal. I could feel the desk, the chair, the logbook. I was real. But for how long? How much of me was already fading, already edited out, already becoming another echo in a building that consumed shifts and turned them into non-existence? At 0100, I started noticing more of them. The ghosts of shifts that never were. They appeared in the camera feeds, faint and translucent, moving through their routines. Agents I didn't recognize, some in current uniforms, some in styles from decades past. All of them working shifts that had been removed from the official record. All of them trapped in a state of partial existence, aware enough to know what had happened, but powerless to change it. I could see them everywhere now. In the hallways, the server rooms, the offices. Dozens of figures moving through the building. Each one experiencing their own erased shift. Each one invisible to the others. We were all there, all occupying the same space, all existing in parallel timelines that had been severed from the main flow of reality. At 0300, I saw Reynolds. Not the current Reynolds, but a younger version from years ago, working a night shift that had been edited out. She moved through the security office like I wasn't there, checking equipment that no longer existed, logging entries in a logbook that wasn't there. I tried to speak to her, but she couldn't hear me. We were in different slices of time, different versions of reality that happened to overlap. "How long have you been here?" I asked, knowing she couldn't answer. But another voice responded, from somewhere in the room I couldn't see. 23 years. I spun around. Who said that? Agent Morrison. I worked here in 2002, November 16th, 2002, a Thursday night. I remember it clearly because it was the night that got taken. You've been here for 23 years? In this building, yes. In this state of partial existence, I can't leave. I'm bound to the shift that never happened, trapped in hours that were removed from the timeline. Is there any way out? Silence. Then, I don't know. None of us have found one. We just exist here, watching shift after shift, some logged and remembered, others erased and forgotten. We're the forgotten ones, Hayes. The ones the building decided shouldn't exist. At 0400, I felt the familiar sensation of fading, my hands becoming translucent, the floor losing solidity beneath my feet. The building was deciding. This shift, my shift, Tuesday the 17th, it was being evaluated for existence. Would it be logged and remembered? Or would it join the others, the missing dates, the erased shifts, the ghosts in the machinery? I grabbed the logbook and tried to write. Do not erase this shift. Agent Hayes must remain in the record. But even as I wrote, the words changed. Routine patrol completed. No incidents to report. The building wouldn't let me advocate for my own existence. It was going to make the decision on its own terms. At 0500, Reynolds arrived early for day shift. She looked at me with concern. Hayes, you look terrible. Are you feeling all right? I'm fine, I said, though I could barely feel my own mouth forming the words. Just a long night. Well, get some rest. I'll take over from here. I gathered my things and headed for the door. With each step, I felt more substantial, more solid. Maybe the building had decided to let this shift remain. Maybe I'd survived the editing process. I got to my car and sat behind the wheel. Everything felt real. The steering wheel under my hands, the seat beneath me, the key in the ignition. I started the engine and drove home through the early morning light. The city was waking up around me, everything normal, everything mundane. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was forgetting something. Something important. Something about my shift that I needed to remember. By the time I reached my apartment, the feeling had faded. Just residual anxiety from a long night. Nothing more. I fell into bed and slept dreamlessly. When I woke up that evening, I checked my work schedule. It showed I was off tonight, Wednesday the 15th. My next shift was Friday the 20th. Wait, that wasn't right. I'd worked Tuesday night. My next shift should be Wednesday, not Friday. I checked my phone calendar. It showed I'd requested Wednesday off weeks ago for a dental appointment. But I didn't remember making that request. I didn't have any dental appointments scheduled. I called the facility. Reynolds answered. Hey Hayes, what's up? I'm just checking my schedule. I'm off tonight, right? That's right. You requested Wednesday off last month. Agent Grant is covering for you. Grant? I didn't recognize the name. Yeah, new guy, just transferred in. He's working Wednesday nights for the next month while he gets oriented. I thanked her and hung up. Something was wrong. My schedule had changed, and I had no memory of requesting the time off. I pulled out the calendar and looked at the dates. November 15th, 17th, 19th, 20th. My shifts. The 16th and 18th were marked as days off, covered by Collins and Grant, respectively. But I had no memory of Collins or Grant, and I had no memory of requesting those days off. I got in my car and drove to the facility. I needed to see the logbook, to check the entries, to confirm that those shifts had actually happened without me. Reynolds seemed surprised to see me. Hayes, I thought you were off tonight. I am. I just need to check something in the logbook. Won't take a minute. She looked hesitant, but let me in. I went straight to the security office and pulled out the logbook. I flipped to November 16th. The page was there, filled with entries in handwriting I didn't recognize. I flipped to November 18th, today, another page, more entries in different handwriting. Both shifts had happened, both were logged and official. But I had no memory of being absent, no memory of these other agents working my shifts. "Reynolds," I called out. "Who is Collins?" She came into the security office. "Collins? Never heard of him. Why?" I pointed at the November 16th entries. "He worked this shift. It's logged right here." Reynolds looked at the page. "Hayes, those are your entries. That's your handwriting." I looked again. She was right. The handwriting was mine. My signature at the bottom of each entry. But I hadn't written them. I'd never even been here on the 16th. I'd called in sick. Except now, the official record showed I'd worked that night and written these logs myself. "Hayes, are you sure you're feeling all right?" Reynolds asked gently. "Maybe you should see medical. You seem really confused." I left without answering. Got in my car and drove aimlessly, trying to make sense of what I was experiencing. The building was rewriting my history, not just the official logs, but my actual past. Shifts I hadn't worked were being added to my record. Shifts I had worked were being removed. My personal timeline was being edited and reorganized according to rules I didn't understand. By the time I got home, I'd convinced myself that I was just tired, stressed, maybe coming down with something. The confusion would pass. But deep down, in a place I couldn't quite access consciously, I knew the truth. I was being edited, systematically. Shifts were being added and removed, memories were being altered, my very existence was being reorganized. And soon, I would forget that anything unusual had ever happened. I would remember only what the building wanted me to remember. I would be just another agent working routine shifts, logging standard activities, never noticing the impossible machinery that surrounded me, never knowing that parts of me had been removed, edited out, made to have never existed. The building always wins. The record always takes precedence. And the agents who realize what's happening, we become echoes, ghosts, fragments of shifts that never were, aware enough to know we've been erased but powerless to prove it. I'm writing this now while I still can, while I still remember. But I know that soon these words will change. They'll become something ordinary, something bland and official. And I'll forget I ever wrote them, just like I'm forgetting everything else. The building is patient. It's been here longer than any of us. It will be here long after we're gone, and it will keep editing, keep removing, keep rewriting. Until only the shifts it approves remain, until only the agents it wants survive. The rest of us will be here, in the spaces between, in the hours that never happened, in the timeline that was erased. We'll be the ghosts in the machinery. The shifts that were never logged. If you're reading this, if somehow these words survived the editing process, please know that we exist. We're real. We were there. We just weren't allowed to remain. And if you work nights in a building that seems to play with time, pay attention to the logbook. Look for the missing dates. Notice the gaps. Because every gap is a shift that was erased. And every erased shift is an agent who became an echo. We're still here. We're still working our shifts. We just don't exist anymore. Not officially. Not in any way that matters. But we remember, and we're trying to warn you. My name is Grant, and I've been with the United States Secret Service for 8 years. I've protected presidents, secured foreign dignitaries, and worked more high-stress details than I can count. But nothing in my training prepared me for the White House after 3 a.m. They don't tell you about the 3 o'clock rule during orientation. It's not in any manual, not part of any official briefing. You learn about it from the other agents, the ones who've worked the overnight interior posts long enough to know. They tell you in quiet voices during shift changes when no supervisors are listening. After 3 in the morning, you follow protocol exactly. No deviations, no improvising, no matter what you see or hear. You do your job by the book. and you don't ask questions. I didn't understand what they meant until my third week on the night shift. My assignment was straightforward enough. Interior security, second floor of the White House residence. The shift ran from 2200 to 0600 4 nights a week. During those hours, the first family was usually asleep. The building was quiet, and my job was to maintain a presence, monitor the hallways, and respond to any security concerns. The second floor of the residence is where the first family lives. Private quarters, bedrooms, sitting rooms. The spaces where they can be away from the public eye. During the day, it's active with staff, family members, and occasional visitors. But at night, after about 11 p.m., it's supposed to be quiet. Everyone asleep, lights dimmed, just silence and stillness. That's the theory anyway. My supervisor was Agent Walker, a 15-year veteran who'd worked more night shifts than anyone else in the detail. He was in his mid-40s, with gray creeping into his hair and the kind of calm demeanor that came from seeing everything twice. On my first night, Walker walked me through the protocols. "Your post is here," he said, indicating a position near the center hall. "You maintain visibility of the main corridor. You check in every 30 minutes on the radio, and you respond to any unusual activity." "Define unusual," I said. Walker paused, choosing his words carefully. "Anything that deviates from normal residential patterns. Unexpected movement, unauthorized persons, security system alerts. Use your judgment." "What about the first family? If they can't sleep and decide to walk around?" "You maintain a respectful distance, you don't engage unless engaged, and you log it in your report. But honestly, that almost never happens. Most nights, once everyone's asleep by 11 or so, they stay asleep until morning." He showed me the posting log, a simple clipboard where I'd note the time of my checks and any observations. The previous week's entries were mind-numbingly boring. 23:30, corridor check, all quiet. 00:00, hourly check, no activity. 0:30, routine patrol, building secure. Walker looked at me seriously. "Grant, I need you to understand something. This is an easy post if you follow the rules. Stay alert, log your activities, don't overthink things. Can you do that?" "Of course," I said. "Good." He hesitated, then added, "And if you notice anything strange after 3 in the morning, just maintain protocol. Don't investigate too deeply. Don't try to explain it. Just note it if necessary and move on." "What kind of strange things?" "You'll know if it happens. Just remember what I said. Protocol first, always." That should have been a clearer warning. But I was new, confident, and certain I could handle anything the assignment threw at me. Walker left at 22:30, and I took my post in the center hall. The second floor was quiet, just as he'd described. Soft lighting from wall sconces, thick carpet muffling any sound. The kind of stillness you only get in a building after everyone's gone to bed. I did my first check at 2300, walked the main corridor, checked the side hallways, confirmed all the doors were closed, everything normal. I logged it and returned to my post. The next few hours passed slowly. I did checks every 30 minutes, radioed in my status, maintained my position. Around midnight, I heard some movement from one of the bedrooms. Footsteps, the sound of a bathroom door closing. Normal nighttime activity. I noted it in the log and continued my watch. At 0100, I did another patrol. The building felt different at this hour, more isolated. During earlier checks, I could still sense the residual energy of the day, like the building was still settling. But after 1 in the morning, that faded completely. It felt like I was the only person awake in the entire structure. I checked the treaty room, the center hall, the west sitting hall, all secure. Started to head back to my post. That's when I noticed the temperature had dropped. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. I could see my breath fogging slightly in the air. I made a note to mention it to maintenance in the morning. Old buildings had climate control issues. At 200, I radioed in my status. Second floor post, hourly check, all clear. The response came back. Copy that. Weather's changing outside, might affect building temperature. Let us know if it becomes an issue. So they'd noticed it too. That was reassuring. Just a normal fluctuation. At 0:30, I was standing at my post when I heard something that made me pause. Music. Very faint, barely audible, coming from somewhere down the hallway. I listened carefully. It sounded like a piano, playing a melody I didn't recognize. Soft, melancholic, the kind of thing you might hear in an old movie. I checked my watch. 0237. Still within normal hours. Maybe someone couldn't sleep and was playing music quietly. It wasn't unheard of. I walked toward the sound, moving quietly down the hallway. The music seemed to be coming from the direction of the yellow oval room. As I got closer, the melody became clearer. Definitely a piano, playing with skill, someone who knew what they were doing. I reached the door to the yellow oval room. It was closed, but I could hear the music clearly now, coming from inside. I knocked softly. "Excuse me, this is Agent Grant. Is everything all right?" The music stopped immediately. Complete silence. I waited for a response. None came. I knocked again. "Sir, ma'am, I'm going to need verbal confirmation that everything is okay." Still nothing. I tried the door handle. Locked. I pulled out my master key and unlocked it, pushing the door open slowly. The room was empty. No piano, no person, no music. Just furniture and shadows. I stepped inside and looked around carefully. The yellow oval room didn't have a piano. Never had, as far as I knew. It was furnished with couches and chairs, antique pieces that had been there for years. I checked the room thoroughly. Nothing out of place, no sign of any disturbance. But I definitely heard music coming from this room. I closed the door and locked it, then radioed in. Second floor post. Investigated possible audio source in yellow oval room. Room is secure, no occupants, no issues found. Copy that. Could have been sound traveling from another area, old building acoustics. That made sense. Sound did strange things in historical buildings. I logged the incident and returned to my post. At 02:45, I noticed the lights in the hallway seemed dimmer than before. Not off, just reduced, like someone had lowered them using a dimmer switch. I checked the control panel near my post. Everything was set to normal levels, but the lights were definitely dimmer. I could barely make out the far end of the hallway now. I radioed in again. Second floor post. Lighting appears to have decreased. Possible electrical issue. Stand by, we'll check the systems. I waited. The lights stayed dim. The temperature seemed to have dropped further. My breath was clearly visible now. At 02:55, my radio crackled. Second floor post. Our systems show all lighting and climate control operating normally. Are you still experiencing issues? I looked at the hallway. The lights were dim, the air was cold, those were facts. But according to the monitoring systems, everything was fine. Affirmative, I said. Visual conditions appear darker than normal. Temperature feels significantly decreased. Copy. We're flagging it for maintenance. Continue normal duties. I checked my watch. 02:57. 3 minutes until 3 in the morning. I don't know why I was watching the time so closely. Something about Walker's warning, about the way he'd emphasized the 3 o'clock rule, made me pay attention to the approaching hour. At 02:59, the hallway lights flickered once. Just a brief flutter, then steady again. At 0300 exactly, everything changed. The temperature plummeted. I could see thick fog forming with each breath. The lights dimmed to almost nothing, just barely enough to see outlines and shapes. And the quality of the silence changed. It went from the peaceful quiet of a sleeping building to something heavier, more oppressive. Like the building itself was holding its breath, I stood very still, every sense on high alert. Something fundamental had shifted. The building felt different now, charged with a presence that hadn't been there a minute ago. I heard a door open somewhere down the hallway. Not a quick movement, but slow and deliberate. The creak of old hinges, the soft click of a latch releasing. I turned toward the sound, my hand instinctively moving toward my weapon. A figure stepped out of one of the bedrooms. I could barely make out details in the dim light. Just a silhouette, tall and thin, moving with an odd, gliding motion. "Excuse me," I called out. "Please identify yourself." The figure didn't respond. It just stood there in the hallway, facing my direction but not moving. "This is Agent Grant with the Secret Service. I need you to identify yourself immediately." Still no response. The figure remained motionless. I pulled out my flashlight and aimed it at the figure. But when I clicked it on, the beam barely penetrated a few feet. The darkness seemed to absorb the light. I started walking toward the figure, maintaining protocol. "I'm approaching your position. Please remain still and keep your hands visible." As I got closer, I could see more details. The figure was wearing old-fashioned clothing, the kind you'd see in photographs from the 1800s. A dark suit, formal and archaic. The face was indistinct, like looking at someone through frosted glass. I was about 10 feet away when the figure turned and walked through a closed door. Not opened it, not pushed it aside, but walked directly through it like the door wasn't there. I stopped in my tracks, my mind trying to process what I'd just seen. That wasn't possible. People didn't walk through solid objects. I reached the door the figure had disappeared through. The Lincoln bedroom. I tried the handle. Locked. I used my key and opened it. The room was empty. No figure, no person, no sign anyone had been there. I checked the entire room thoroughly. Under the bed, in the closets, behind furniture. Nothing. I stood in the center of the Lincoln bedroom, my heart pounding, trying to make sense of what I'd just witnessed. There had to be a rational explanation. Trick of the light, fatigue-induced hallucination, something. But I knew what I'd seen. A figure in old-fashioned clothing, walking through a closed door. I radioed in. "Second floor post. Investigated possible intruder in Lincoln bedroom. Room is clear, no occupants found." "Copy that. Did you get a visual on the intruder?" I hesitated. How could I explain what I'd seen in a way that wouldn't sound insane? "Negative. By the time I reached the room, there was no one there. Might have been a shadow or lighting effect." "Understood. Continue monitoring." I left the Lincoln bedroom and returned to my post. My hands were shaking slightly. I forced myself to calm down, to breathe steadily, to think rationally. Walker had warned me. After 3 in the morning, you follow protocol exactly. Don't investigate too deeply. Don't try to explain it. Just note it if necessary and move on. He'd known. Somehow, he'd known that strange things happened after 3 a.m., and he'd told me not to dig into it, just to do my job. At 03:15, I heard footsteps. Multiple sets, walking in the hallway above me. But there was no 3rd floor in this section of the building. The ceiling above me was the roof. The footsteps continued for about a minute, then faded away. At 0:30, I saw lights flickering in the east sitting hall. Not the overhead lights, but moving lights like someone walking with a candle. I went to investigate and found the room empty, but I could smell something. Smoke. Not fire smoke, but tobacco smoke. Like someone had been smoking a pipe or cigar. At 03:45, A door at the end of the hallway opened on its own. I watched it swing wide, revealing the dark room beyond. I approached cautiously, weapon drawn now, protocol or not. The room was a guest bedroom, unoccupied according to the schedule. I stepped inside and found it empty, but the bed was unmade. Someone had been sleeping there. The sheets were disturbed, the pillow had an indentation from a head, but no one was supposed to be using this room. It had been vacant for weeks. I checked the sheets, they were warm, recently occupied. I radioed in again. Second floor post. Found evidence of unauthorized occupancy in guest bedroom 214. Investigating. Stand by. A longer pause than usual, then, Grant, what's your current time? I checked my watch. 0347. Another pause. Continue standard protocols. Don't deviate from your posting procedures, clear? There was something in the voice now, a tension I hadn't heard before. Whoever was on the other end of the radio knew what was happening. They knew about the 3 o'clock rule. Clear, I said. I left the guest bedroom and returned to my post. Around me, the White House after 3 in the morning was revealing itself. This wasn't the building I'd been guarding for the past few hours. This was something else, something that only emerged in the deepest part of the night. At 0400, I saw her. A woman in a long white dress, walking down the center hall with purpose. She moved like she belonged there, like she was going about normal business. She walked right past me without acknowledgement, heading toward the west sitting hall. I didn't call out this time. I didn't try to stop her. I just watched as she walked to the end of the hallway and faded from sight, becoming transparent and then nothing. At 0415, I heard voices. A conversation happening in one of the rooms, too muffled to make out words, but clearly 2 people talking. When I investigated, I found empty rooms and silence. At 0430, the lights brightened slightly. The temperature began to rise. The oppressive quality of the air started to lift. At 0445, everything returned to normal. Full lighting, comfortable temperature, the peaceful quiet of a sleeping household. It was like a switch had been flipped, transforming the building back to its ordinary state. I stood at my post, breathing hard, trying to process what I'd experienced over the past hour and 45 minutes. At 0500, Walker arrived for early shift change. He took one look at me and nodded knowingly. You saw them. Them? The others. The ones who are still here after 3 a.m. I didn't know what to say. Walker gestured for me to follow him to a small office down the hall, out of earshot from any monitoring equipment. Look, he said quietly. What you experienced tonight is normal. Well, normal for this building after 3 in the morning. It happens every night. Has happened for as long as anyone can remember. What's happening? Walker shrugged. No one knows for sure. Some people think it's residual energy from all the history this building has seen. Others think it's something about the location, the land itself. A few believe the building exists in multiple time periods simultaneously, and after 3 a.m., the barriers between them get thin. And the service knows about this? Of course we know. Everyone who works nights here eventually experiences it. But it's not something we can put in reports or investigate officially. What would we say? The White House is haunted after 3 in the morning? It would be a media nightmare. So we just ignore it? We acknowledge it privately and follow protocol publicly. We do our jobs, we keep people safe, and we don't make the strange things we see into bigger issues than they need to be. Walker looked at me seriously. Grant, I need to know you can handle this. Can you work nights here knowing what happens after 3? I thought about it. The figures I'd seen, the sounds, the impossible things. but nothing had been threatening. Nothing had actually posed a danger. It was just presence, activity from another time, bleeding through into ours. "I can handle it," I said. "Good, because it gets easier once you know what to expect. And there are rules, unwritten but important, about how to coexist with whatever's happening here." "What rules?" "Don't interact with them directly. Don't try to communicate or make contact. Just observe and move on. Never investigate the Lincoln bedroom between 3 and 4 if you can avoid it. And most importantly, never, ever deviate from standard security protocols, no matter what you see. The protocols keep you grounded in this time, this reality." I nodded, filing away each instruction. Walker clapped me on the shoulder. "You did fine tonight. Get some rest. It'll make more sense after you've processed it." But as I drove home in the early morning light, watching the city wake up around me, I knew some things would never make complete sense. I'd just spent an hour and 45 minutes in a building that existed in multiple time periods at once, and tomorrow night, I'd do it again. After that first night, I started paying closer attention, not just to what happened after 3 a.m., but to everything. The building's rhythms, the subtle changes in atmosphere, the way other agents behaved around certain times and places. I noticed that the other night shift agents never lingered after their shifts ended. They did their handoffs quickly and left, like they couldn't get out of the building fast enough. And no one ever talked about what they saw during those post-3 a.m. hours. It was an unspoken agreement. We all experienced it, we all knew it was real, but we never discussed the details. My 4th night on the post, I started documenting patterns. Not officially, just in a private notebook I kept. I wanted to understand what I was dealing with, even if I couldn't explain it. The activity always began at exactly 3 o'clock a.m., not 2:59, not 3:01, but precisely at the top of the hour. Like a switch being flipped, the temperature always dropped first. Then the lights dimmed, then the sounds started, footsteps, voices, doors opening and closing. The figures appeared to follow specific routes. The woman in white always walked from the center hall to the west sitting hall. The man in the old-fashioned suit always emerged from the same bedroom and entered the Lincoln bedroom. There were others, too, each with their own pattern, their own routine. They never acknowledged my presence. They moved through their activities as if I wasn't there, as if they were replaying scenes from another time. But sometimes, just sometimes, one of them would pause and look directly at me. Those moments were the most unnerving. The sense of being seen by something that shouldn't be able to see you, being noticed by the past. 2 weeks into the assignment, I experienced my first deviation from the pattern. It was a Tuesday night, quiet evening. Nothing unusual during the pre-3 a.m. hours. I'd done my checks, maintained my post, everything by the book. At 3 o'clock a.m., the familiar changes began. Temperature drop, lights dimming, the quality of silence shifting. At 3:15, I saw the woman in white making her usual walk down the center hall, but this time she stopped halfway down the corridor. She turned to face me directly, and she spoke. "He's coming." Her voice was distant, like hearing someone speak from underwater, but the words were clear enough. "Who's coming?" I asked, forgetting Walker's warning about not interacting. She didn't answer. She just turned and continued her walk, fading from sight at the end of the hallway. I stood frozen, processing what had just happened. In 2 weeks of observations, none of the figures had ever spoken. They just moved through their routines silently, unaware of the present. But she'd spoken to me, warned me about something. At 3:30, I found out what. I was doing a routine check of the treaty room when I heard a sound I hadn't heard before. Heavy footsteps, purposeful and steady, coming from the main staircase. These weren't the soft, gliding movements of the usual figures. These were solid, real, like someone actually walking up the stairs. I moved to investigate, hand on my weapon. The footsteps reached the second-floor landing and stopped. I could see a figure standing there. Unlike the others, this one was clear and solid, not translucent or indistinct. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing what looked like a military uniform from the Civil War era. He stood at the top of the stairs, scanning the hallway like he was searching for something. Then his eyes locked on mine. For a long moment we stared at each other. This wasn't like the brief glances I'd gotten from other figures. This was direct, sustained eye contact. He saw me. Really saw me. He started walking toward me. I backed up instinctively. "Sir, this is a restricted area. I need you to stop and identify yourself." He kept walking, his boots heavy on the carpet. As he got closer, I could see more details. The uniform was Union Army, an officer's coat with brass buttons. His face was weathered, hard, the face of someone who'd seen combat. "Sir, I'm ordering you to stop." He didn't stop. He was 10 feet away now, 5 feet. Close enough that I could have reached out and touched him. I drew my weapon. "Stop immediately, or I will—" He walked through me. Not past me, through me. I felt a wave of intense cold as he passed, like being dunked in ice water. For a moment, I could see through his eyes, feel what he was feeling. Urgency, purpose. He was looking for someone, searching the building for a specific person. Then he was past me, continuing down the hallway. I turned and watched him check doors, moving with military efficiency. He reached the Lincoln bedroom and went inside. I stood there shaking, my weapon still drawn, trying to process what had just happened. That hadn't been like the other encounters. That figure had been aware, purposeful, searching for something. I gave him a minute, then followed to the Lincoln bedroom. I opened the door carefully. The room was empty. No sign of the military figure. But I could smell something. Gunpowder and blood. The scent was faint but unmistakable. I backed out of the room and closed the door. Whatever that figure had been, whatever he'd been searching for, I didn't want to know more. At 3:45, activity died down as usual. At 4 o'clock, everything returned to normal. When Walker arrived for shift change at 5 o'clock, I pulled him aside and told him about the military figure. His expression grew serious. "You saw him, the searching soldier. You know about him?" "Everyone who works nights long enough sees him eventually. He's different from the others, more aware, more purposeful. And he's looking for something he never finds." "What's he looking for?" Walker shook his head. "No one knows. Some people think he's searching for casualties, checking on wounded men. Others think he's looking for a specific person, but he appears every few weeks, searches the building, and then disappears. He's been doing it for over a century." A century? The first documented sighting was in 1892. An usher wrote about seeing a Union officer walking the halls. Since then, dozens of people have seen him. Presidents, staff, security. Always the same figure, always searching, never finding. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. What happens if he finds what he's looking for? Walker looked at me strangely. "I don't know. No one does. He never has." Over the next few weeks, I cataloged more patterns and variations. Some nights were more active than others. Certain dates seemed to trigger increased activity, anniversaries of historical events, dates when significant things had happened in the building. The most active night was always the anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's death, April 14th. I wasn't scheduled that night, but Walker told me about it later. Every door on the second floor had opened simultaneously. Figures had crowded the hallways, dozens of them, moving through scenes from a funeral that had happened 160 years ago. "It's like the building remembers," Walker said. "The stronger the event, the stronger the echo." I started to notice other things too. Small deviations from normal reality that only appeared after 3 a.m. Doors that led to rooms that didn't exist. I'd open a door to a familiar guest room and find myself looking at a completely different space. A parlor from another era, a bedroom with Victorian furniture. Once, even a makeshift hospital ward with beds lined up in rows. When I'd close the door and open it again, the room would be normal. The modern guest room, exactly as it should be. Mirrors showed reflections that didn't match reality. I'd walk past a mirror and see myself, but also see other figures behind me. People who weren't there when I turned around. Clocks would run backward. I'd watch a wall clock and see the hands moving counterclockwise, time reversing itself. But my watch would show normal progression. The building, after 3 a.m., wasn't just haunted. It was unstable, existing in multiple time periods simultaneously, unable to decide which version of itself was real. One night, about a month into my assignment, I experienced something that made me question whether I was still in my own timeline at all. It started normally enough. The 3 a.m. changes, the temperature drop, the dimming lights. I took my post and prepared for the usual activity. At 3:15, I saw a figure I recognized. Agent Walker. But not the current Walker, a younger version, maybe 10 years younger, wearing the uniform style from a decade ago. He was doing a patrol check, moving down the hallway exactly as I would. When he reached my position, he didn't see me. He looked right through me, the same way the historical figures did. I watched him complete his patrol and return to the posting position. He stood there, alert and professional, doing the job I was currently doing. I was watching a past version of Walker, working a night shift from years ago. The building was showing me its own history, replaying events from its recent past. But then, something stranger happened. I saw myself, another version of me, walking down the hallway, doing a patrol check. This version of me was older, maybe 5 years older, moving with the confidence of someone who'd been doing this job for a long time. He walked right past where I was standing. I could have reached out and touched him, but I knew my hand would pass through. He was from the future, working a shift that hadn't happened yet. I was seeing multiple time periods simultaneously, past, present, and future, all occupying the same space, all equally real. The future version of me completed his patrol and returned to his posting position. For a moment, there were 3 of us in the hallway: past Walker, present me, and future me. 3 different times, 3 different shifts, all happening at once. Then, the future me turned and looked directly at where I was standing. Our eyes met. He could see me the same way I could see him. He mouthed something. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read his lips. "Don't trust the protocols." Then he faded, and I was alone in the hallway again, shaking with the implications of what I'd just witnessed. Don't trust the protocols. The rules Walker had given me. The standard procedures that were supposed to keep me grounded in this timeline. My future self was warning me not to rely on them. But why? What did he know that I didn't? At 3:45, I radioed in my hourly check. The response came back normal. Everything seemed fine. But I couldn't shake the warning from my future self. Don't trust the protocols. At 4 o'clock, when things returned to normal, I went to the small office and pulled up the duty logs on the computer. I wanted to see the historical records, check if what I'd been experiencing matched what others had documented. The logs went back decades. I scrolled through them, reading entries from agents long retired or dead. Most were routine. Building secure, no incidents. Completed rounds, all quiet. But occasionally there were other entries, carefully worded, vague, but hinting at something unusual. Investigated unexplained sounds, unable to determine source. Observed anomalous lighting conditions, reported to maintenance. Responded to movement in unoccupied areas, no intruders found. The agents who'd worked here before me had all experienced the same things, and they'd all used the same careful language, documenting just enough to cover themselves, but not enough to raise alarms. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. An entry from 15 years ago, written by an agent whose name had been redacted. After-hours activity has become increasingly intrusive. Figures are no longer passive observers. They are attempting interaction, and in some cases demonstrating awareness of current timeline. Recommend immediate investigation and potential protocol revision. The entry was dated April 14th, the anniversary of Lincoln's death, and beneath it, in different handwriting, was a supervisor's note. Agent removed from posting. Psychiatric evaluation ordered. No protocol revision necessary. The agent who tried to report what was really happening had been labeled mentally unstable and removed. That's what happened when you tried to make the truth official. I closed the log and sat back, thinking. The service knew what was happening here. They'd known for decades, maybe longer, but they couldn't acknowledge it officially, so they had this unspoken system. Work the shift, observe the anomalies, log it in vague terms, and never push for real answers. And anyone who tried to break that pattern got removed. Don't trust the protocols. My future self had tried to warn me. The protocols weren't designed to keep me safe from the phenomena. They were designed to keep me compliant, to make sure I didn't ask too many questions or demand real explanations. I was being managed, contained, kept in a state of controlled ignorance. At 5 o'clock, when Walker arrived, I almost confronted him about it. But something stopped me. I looked at his tired face, the resignation in his eyes, and I realized he was just as trapped as I was. He knew the truth. He'd probably tried to push for answers early in his career. And he'd learned the same lesson everyone learned. You could either accept the situation and keep your job, or you could fight it and get labeled unstable. Walker had chosen acceptance, and he was trying to guide me toward the same choice. But I wasn't sure I could do that. Not after seeing my future self. Not after reading that redacted entry. Something was escalating. The phenomena weren't just passive historical echoes anymore. They were becoming more aware, more interactive, more present. And the protocols that were supposed to protect us were really just keeping us blind to what was actually happening. 3 months into the assignment, I started noticing changes in the patterns. The phenomena were evolving, becoming more responsive to my presence. The figures that had once moved through their routines without acknowledgement now paused when I walked past. They didn't speak, but they watched, following me with their eyes, tracking my movements. Doors that I'd left closed would be standing open when I returned. Not every door, just specific ones. The Lincoln bedroom, the Queen's bedroom, the treaty room. Always the same rooms, always after I'd just passed them. Objects moved, small things at first. A chair shifted slightly from where it had been. A book on a side table opening to a different page. A picture frame turned to face the wall. Then, larger movements. One night, I found all the furniture in the yellow oval room rearranged in a completely different configuration. Couches against different walls, tables moved, lamps in new positions. It would have taken hours for a person to do it, but it had happened in the 15 minutes I'd been checking another area. The building was interacting with me now. Not threatening, but definitely aware of my presence and responding to it. Walker noticed the change too. You've been here long enough that you're part of the pattern now, he explained. The building recognizes you, accepts you as part of its environment. Is that good or bad? He shrugged. Depends on how you handle it. Some agents found it comforting, like the building was acknowledging them. Others found it deeply unsettling. Just remember the rules. Observe, document if necessary, but don't engage directly. But it was becoming harder to avoid engagement. One night in early February, I was doing my 3:30 patrol when I heard a voice call my name. Not my last name, my first name. James. I stopped mid-step. No one in the White House called me by my first name. Everyone used last names or rank. James. The voice came from the Lincoln bedroom. I approached the door slowly. It was standing open, though I'd closed it on my last check. Inside the room, I could see a figure standing by the window. The woman in white, the one who'd warned me months ago about he's coming. She turned to face me. James, you need to listen carefully. Every protocol told me to walk away, to not engage, to maintain professional distance from the phenomena. But she knew my name, and she was speaking directly to me with clear purpose. What do you want? I asked. The building is trying to warn you. Something is wrong with the timeline. The barriers are weakening. I don't understand. She moved closer, and I could see her face more clearly now. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with kind eyes and an expression of genuine concern. This building exists in multiple time periods simultaneously. Usually, they remain separate, but recently, they've been bleeding together more and more. Past, present, future, all mixing, overlapping. Why are you telling me this? Because you're aware. Most of the living who work here can see us, but they don't truly acknowledge what's happening. They follow their protocols and ignore what doesn't fit. But you've been documenting, observing, trying to understand. That makes you important. Important how? She hesitated, looking troubled. There's something coming. An event that will happen in this building. Something catastrophic. It's creating ripples backward through time. That's why the phenomena have been intensifying. The building is trying to warn everyone, but most people can't or won't hear. What kind of event? I don't know the details. I only see the echoes of it. But it's bad, James. Bad enough that it's shaking the foundations of time itself in this place. I felt ice in my veins. When? Soon, within your timeline. Maybe weeks, maybe months. The closer it gets, the more the barriers break down. Before I could ask more, she flickered and faded. Just gone, leaving me alone in the Lincoln bedroom with more questions than answers. I reported the interaction to Walker the next morning. He listened without interruption, his expression growing more concerned as I spoke. You engaged with her, he said when I finished. That breaks protocol. She knew my name, Walker. My first name. How is that possible? He was quiet for a long moment. The building knows things, knows people. The longer you're here, the more it learns about you. It can access information from any time period where you exist. Past, present, or future. She said something catastrophic is coming. An event that's creating ripples backward through time. Walker's face went pale. Did she say what event? No. Just that it's bad enough to shake the building's temporal foundations. He stood up and paced the small office. This has happened before. In 2001, in the months before September 11th, agents working here reported increased phenomena. Figures trying to communicate, objects moving, warnings being issued. We thought it was random until after the attacks. Then we realized the building had been trying to warn us. You're saying this place can sense future disasters. I'm saying this building has stood at the center of American power for over 2 centuries. It's absorbed every major event, every crisis, every decision made within its walls. That kind of accumulated history creates something. Whether it's consciousness or just a recording that can play backward and forward through time, I don't know. But yes, it seems to sense major disruptions before they happen. Then we need to report this, warn someone. Walker shook his head. And tell them what? That a ghost told you something bad is coming? They'll remove you from posting so fast your head will spin. The only reason I'm still here after 15 years is because I learned to keep the truth to myself. So, we just ignore it? We stay alert, we document what we can, and we hope that if something is coming, we'll recognize it when we see it. He put a hand on my shoulder. James, I know this is frustrating, but the system isn't built to handle this kind of information. All we can do is our jobs. But I couldn't accept that. Not after hearing the warning, not after seeing the fear in that woman's eyes. I started paying closer attention to everything. Not just the phenomena after 3 a.m., but everything during my shifts. Security briefings, threat assessments, any unusual activity in or around the White House. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Normal presidential schedule, routine security protocols, no elevated threat levels. But the phenomena continued to intensify. More figures appeared each night. More rooms showed temporal overlaps. More voices tried to communicate warnings. One night, I counted 17 separate figures in the center hall, all from different time periods, all trying to exist in the same space. They flickered in and out, appearing and disappearing, creating a strobe effect of different eras. The searching soldier appeared more frequently, sometimes multiple times a night. He checked the same rooms over and over, growing more agitated each time he failed to find what he was looking for. And then there was the new figure. A man in a modern suit, contemporary clothing, someone who could have been walking the halls last week. But he appeared after 3 a.m., which meant he was part of the phenomena. I saw him for the first time on a Thursday night in late February. He was standing in the center hall, looking confused and disoriented. When he saw me, his face showed relief. "Agent Grant, thank God. I need you to listen to me very carefully." His voice was clear, solid, not distant like the others. He sounded completely real. "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm Agent Miller. I work day shift security. Or I will work it. Or I did work it. Temporal grammar gets confusing." He looked around, agitated. "I don't have much time. The building pulled me back here to warn you." "Warn me about what?" "March 15th, the Ides of March. Something happens on that date. I can't see exactly what, but it's bad. Evacuation level bad. You need to make sure everyone gets out." March 15th is 3 weeks away. If there's a threat, why aren't current intelligence reports showing it? Because it's not external, it's internal, something that happens inside the building itself. The ripple effect is so strong, it's pulling people like me backward through time to try to warn you. He started to flicker, becoming less solid. "I'm losing coherence. Listen, on March 15th at 3 a.m., you need to..." He vanished mid-sentence, leaving me standing alone in the hallway. March 15th. 2 weeks and 6 days away. Whatever was coming, I now had a specific date. I went to Walker immediately with this information. He listened, his face grave. "Agent Miller doesn't exist," he said when I finished. "There's no one by that name on the day shift roster. I've worked here 15 years, I know everyone. He said he will work here. Future tense. Maybe he hasn't been hired yet. Or maybe what you saw was a future version of someone else, appearing with a false identity because the building can't perfectly translate across timelines." Walker rubbed his face. "James, do you understand what you're suggesting? If something happens on March 15th at 3 o'clock a.m., and you're working that night, you'll be right in the middle of it. Then maybe I shouldn't work that night. You think changing your schedule will help? If the building wants you here for that shift, you'll be here. That's how this works. It's not random coincidence that you're the one receiving these warnings. Why me? Why not you? Or someone with more experience? Walker was quiet for a long moment. Because I stopped listening years ago. I follow protocols. I do my job. But I don't engage with the phenomena anymore. I can't afford to. It's too draining, too dangerous for your mental health. You still have the openness, the willingness to believe. That's why they're reaching out to you. I need to report this. File it officially. And I can't stop you. But understand what you're risking. Your career, your reputation, possibly your freedom if they decide you're unstable. I thought about it for the rest of the shift. By the time I went home that morning, I'd made my decision. I wouldn't file an official report. But I would be ready on March 15th. Whatever was coming, I'd face it with my eyes open. The 2 weeks leading up to March 15th were the most intense I'd experienced. Every night, the phenomena escalated. Figures appeared in broad daylight now, visible to other agents, too. The temporal barriers were breaking down completely. Other night shift agents started reporting similar experiences. They'd see figures, hear voices, witness impossible things. The phenomena could no longer be contained to the post-3 a.m. hours. Walker looked more exhausted each day. It's happening faster than before, he told me. Whatever's coming on the 15th, it's creating stronger ripples than we've seen. On March 14th, my last shift before the target date, Walker pulled me aside for a private conversation. I'm reassigning you, he said. You're off tomorrow night. Agent Reynolds will cover your post. No, I said immediately. I need to be here. James, I'm trying to protect you. If something happens, then I should be here for it. All those warnings, all those figures trying to communicate. They were reaching out to me specifically. I'm supposed to be here. Walker studied my face. You really believe that? Yes. He sighed. Then at least know what you're walking into. I've been researching the date. March 15th has significance in this building's history. 3 major events happened on that date across different years. A failed assassination attempt in 1933, a significant policy decision in 1968, and a structural crisis in 1989. What kind of structural crisis? Part of the building's foundation shifted. They evacuated everyone for 36 hours while engineers assessed the damage. It was kept out of the press, but it came very close to catastrophic failure. And all 3 happened on March 15th. At different times, yes. Maybe that's what creates the vulnerability. Multiple significant events on the same date across different timelines, all converging. March 15th arrived. I reported for duty at 2200 hours, trying to act normal despite my racing heart. The building felt different immediately. The air was charged, electric, like the atmosphere before a major storm. Other agents felt it too. I could see the tension in their faces, the way they moved more carefully, more alertly. Reynolds briefed me quickly. Command wants extra vigilance tonight. There's been chatter about a potential security event, nothing specific, but everyone's on heightened alert. What kind of event? They're not saying. Just maintain standard protocols and report anything unusual immediately. After she left, I took my post in the center hall and waited. The first few hours passed slowly. I did my checks, radioed in my status, maintained my position. Everything normal on the surface, but the building's atmosphere continued to intensify. At midnight, I saw the first anomaly. A door in the hallway rippled, like looking at a reflection in disturbed water. For a moment, I could see through it into multiple time periods. The room, as it existed now, as it existed in the 1930s, as it would exist in some future I couldn't identify. At 0100, the temperature began to drop. Earlier than usual. The 3 o'clock phenomena were starting ahead of schedule. At 0200, I radioed in my check and got static in response. I tried again. More static. Communication with command was breaking down. At 0245, the hallway lights began to flicker. Not dimming, but cycling through different intensities and even different colors. I saw gaslight, electric light, and something else. A pure white light that didn't come from any fixture. At 0300, everything changed. The building lurched. Not physically, but temporally. I felt it in my bones, like reality itself was shifting gears. Suddenly, the hallway was crowded. Dozens of figures, maybe hundreds, all occupying the same space. I saw Union soldiers, 1920s staff members, modern-era agents, people in clothing styles I didn't recognize. All of them flickering in and out of existence, all trying to be real simultaneously. The woman in white appeared next to me. It's happening, the convergence. All the timelines are collapsing into one moment. What do I do? Stay grounded. Remember when you are. The building is going to try to pull you into other times, but you need to remain anchored to now. The searching soldier ran past, no longer methodical but panicked. He was shouting something I couldn't hear over the roar of voices that filled the hallway. The walls rippled. I could see through them into other versions of the building. Different layouts, different decorations, the same space existing in multiple configurations. I grabbed onto a doorframe. Something solid. Something real. The woman in white grabbed my shoulder. Listen to me. This happened before and it will happen again. The building exists at a nexus point, a place where time itself is unstable. Every few decades, all the overlapping timelines converge. When they do, reality briefly becomes fluid. How do I stop it? You can't stop it. You can only survive it. Stay focused on your present moment. Don't let the other times pull you in. A figure appeared in front of me. It was me. My future self. The one I'd seen months ago. James, he said, urgently, in 30 seconds you're going to see something catastrophic. A structural collapse, a fire, something that looks like it's destroying the building. It's not real. It's a temporal echo of one of the previous convergences. Don't react to it. Don't try to save anyone. Just stay where you are. How do you know? Because I lived through this moment. I'm from 6 years in your future, pulled back to help you survive what I barely survived. The building shook. Plaster fell from the ceiling. I heard screams, saw smoke pouring from the Lincoln bedroom. It's not real, my future self shouted. It's the 1989 event, bleeding through. Stay grounded. I closed my eyes and focused on the sensation of the doorframe under my hands. Solid wood, cool and smooth. Real. Present, mine. The screaming continued. The smell of smoke intensified. I felt heat on my face, but I didn't open my eyes. I didn't let go of the doorframe. The woman in white's voice cut through the chaos. You're doing well. Just a little longer. The convergence is peaking. Time lost meaning. I might have stood there for minutes or hours. Past, present, and future crashed together like waves, each one trying to pull me into its current. I saw myself at different ages. A younger me on my first day at the Secret Service Academy. An older me, retiring after decades of service. A middle-aged me, standing in this exact spot, holding this exact doorframe, living through this exact moment. I saw other agents. Reynolds, working a shift from 10 years ago. Walker, fresh-faced and young, just starting on the night detail. Agent Morrison, the one whose report had been redacted, standing in the hallway trying to document what was happening around him. I saw presidents. Lincoln pacing the halls in the middle of the night. Roosevelt making critical decisions in the Oval Office. Leaders from every era, all of them present, all of them real. The building showed me its complete history in a single, overwhelming rush. 200 years of moments, all happening simultaneously. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The hallway was empty. Quiet. Normal lighting, normal temperature. Just me, standing alone in the center hall at 03:12 hours, according to my watch. I let go of the doorframe slowly. My hands were cramped from gripping it so hard. I looked around. Everything appeared normal. No smoke, no structural damage, no crowds of temporal figures. But something had changed. I could feel it. The building felt different now, calmer, like pressure had been released. My radio crackled. Second floor post, status check. All clear, I responded automatically. No incidents to report. And that was true, in a way. How could I report what had just happened? A temporal convergence where all the building's timelines collapsed into one moment. They'd think I'd had a psychotic break. I completed the rest of my shift in a daze. At 0600, Walker arrived to relieve me. He took one look at my face and nodded. You made it through. You knew. You knew exactly what would happen. I suspected. I've seen convergences before, though never that intense. He guided me to the small office. How do you feel? Shaken, confused, but I stayed grounded like you taught me. I didn't let it pull me into another timeline. Good. That's the important thing. Walker hesitated. James, I need to ask you something. During the convergence, did you see yourself? Your future self? Yes, he helped me. Told me what was happening, warned me not to react to the temporal echoes. Walker looked troubled. I was afraid of that. Afraid of what? It means you're locked in now. You saw your own future, 6 years ahead. That creates a temporal loop. You're guaranteed to live at least that long, work here that long, and eventually become the version of yourself that goes back to help you. Is that a bad thing? It's complicated. It means you're bound to this place, this building, this phenomena. You can't leave, can't transfer, can't escape. Not for at least 6 years, maybe longer. I thought about that. 6 more years of night shifts, of temporal phenomena, of impossible things. 6 years of living at the intersection of multiple timelines. I can handle it, I said. But Walker looked unconvinced. Can you? Because I've watched agents try. The ones who see their future selves either embrace it or break under the weight. There's no middle ground. I left the White House that morning with a strange sense of acceptance. I'd survived the convergence. I'd stayed grounded in my timeline. And I'd learned that I had at least 6 more years here, whether I wanted them or not. Over the next few weeks, the phenomena returned to their normal patterns. Post 3 a.m. activity. Historical figures moving through routines. The usual temporal overlaps. But I noticed changes. The figures were more aware of me now. They'd nod when I walked past, acknowledge my presence. Some even spoke brief greetings. The woman in white became a regular presence. I'd see her several times a week, and she'd always say the same thing. Thank you for staying grounded. The searching soldier finally found what he was looking for. One night, I saw him embrace another figure, a young man in civilian clothes, and they both faded together, finally at peace. And I started seeing my future self regularly. He'd appear during quiet moments, always 6 years older, always trying to pass along some small piece of advice or warning. Don't take the assignment in July 2026. It goes bad. Reynolds is going to ask you a question next month. Say yes. When you meet her in 2027, trust your instincts. Small glimpses of a future I was destined to live, whether I wanted to or not. Walker and I developed an unspoken partnership. He'd handled the phenomena his way for 15 years. I was learning to handle them mine. We were both trapped in our own ways, both serving as guardians of secrets we couldn't share. One night, about 2 months after the convergence, I asked him something I'd been wondering. Have you ever seen your future self? He was quiet for a long moment. No, and that's how I know I won't be doing this much longer. The building shows you your future if you're meant to continue here. If it doesn't show you, it's because there's no future here to see. What does that mean? It means I'm retiring soon. Maybe this year, maybe next. But my time here is ending. He looked at me seriously. And yours is just beginning. The building has chosen you, James. You're going to be here a long time. How do you know? Because I've seen the patterns. The agents who see their future selves, who survive convergences, who engage with the phenomena, they're the ones the building keeps. And you've done all three. Is that what you want? To leave? Walker smiled sadly. I've given this place 15 years. I've seen things that would break most people. I've kept secrets that have eaten at me for over a decade. Yes, I want to leave. I want to have a normal life again, sleep normal hours, work a job where the past doesn't literally walk past you in the hallway. I'll miss having you here. You'll be fine. Better than fine. The building trusts you in a way it never trusted me. That's valuable, even if it's also terrifying. I thought about that later, during the quiet hours after 3 a.m. when the building revealed its true nature. Was I okay with being bound to this place, with living at the intersection of multiple timelines, with seeing impossible things every night? I didn't have an answer, but I knew I didn't have a choice either. The temporal loop was set. My future self would go back to help me during the convergence, which meant I had to become that future self, which meant I had to stay. Circular logic. Inescapable. 3 months after the convergence, Walker put in for retirement. He'd served 20 years with the Secret Service, earned his pension, done his time. On his last night, we did the shift change like always. Professional, efficient, by the book. But before he left, he said something that stays with me. The building needs people like you, James. People who can see the truth and not break from it. People who can witness impossible things and keep functioning. You're stronger than I ever was. I don't feel strong. I feel trapped. Same thing sometimes. Strength is continuing forward even when you don't have a choice. He shook my hand. Good luck. And remember, the protocols exist to protect you, but they're not absolute. Trust your instincts over official procedure. The building will teach you what you need to know. After he left, I stood alone in the center hall at 0100, waiting for the phenomena to begin. And I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the temporal overlaps, not of the figures from other times, not of the convergences that might come in the future. I'd learned to live in a building that existed in multiple times at once. I'd learned to navigate a reality where past, present, and future were all equally real. And I'd learned that some prisons you don't escape. You just learn to make them home. At 300, the familiar changes began. Temperature drop, dimming lights, the quality of silence shifting. The woman in white appeared, walking her usual route down the center hall. When she reached my position, she stopped and smiled. You're adapting well. Do I have a choice? Everyone has choices. You've chosen to stay aware, to engage, to understand. Many would have closed themselves off, followed the protocols blindly, pretended none of this was real. Would that have been better? Easier, perhaps, but not better. The building needs guardians who can see it fully, in all its temporal layers. You're becoming one of those guardians. For 6 more years at least. She tilted her head. Oh, James, did you really think it was only 6 years? You saw one future self during the convergence. But there are others. Many others. You're going to be here much longer than you realize. How much longer? But she faded before answering, leaving me alone with the implications. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app, where I'd been documenting everything I could. Not officially, just for myself. A record of what was really happening in this building, written by someone who couldn't look away. I added a new entry. March 15th, 2025. Survived the temporal convergence. Saw my future self from 6 years ahead. He helped me stay grounded. But tonight the woman in white suggested there are other future versions of me, potentially many years ahead. Am I going to spend the rest of my career here? Decades instead of years? Is this building going to be my entire life? I don't know. I can't see that far ahead. All I know is that right now, in this moment, I'm still here, still standing my post, still witnessing things that shouldn't be possible. The building after 3 a.m. is real. The phenomena are real. The temporal overlaps are real. And I'm learning to live in a place where time itself is negotiable. Walker warned me that the building chooses its guardians. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was chosen the moment I took this assignment. Maybe even before that. Or maybe choice and destiny are the same thing when you're living in a place where all times exist simultaneously. I'll keep doing my job. Keep following protocols when they make sense. Trusting my instincts when they don't. Keep documenting what I see, even if no official report will ever include the truth. Because someone needs to know. Someone needs to remember. The White House after 3 a.m. is more than just a building. It's a nexus point. A place where all the layers of time touch each other. And I'm the one standing guard at the intersection. For 6 years, or 60, or forever. I guess I'll find out. I closed the Notes app and looked down the hallway. Empty now. Quiet, waiting for the next wave of phenomena. And somewhere in the building, I knew my future self was watching. Maybe 6 years ahead, maybe more. Watching me take the first steps down a path he'd already walked. A path that leads deeper and deeper into the temporal heart of this place, where past and present and future are all just different rooms in the same endless hallway. I'm still here, still standing my post, still guarding a building that exists in times I can't fully understand, and I have a feeling I'm going to be here for a very long time. After all, the building always wins, and it's chosen me as one of its own. Welcome to the White House after 3 a.m., where time means nothing, and everything.